Cersei said with a condescending tone. While I do not share Littlefinger's ability at making gold multiply, I also have to deal with paying off all the promises he made. The Iron Bank has already sent an envoy asking about debt repayments. Tyrion shot back at his sister. The crown's income is nearly 10 times what it used to be. You should have no problem paying the debts. Tywin lectured. So are the expenses. Tyrion defended. Find other places to cut. The wedding will go on as planned. Now if there is nothing else, you all are dismissed. Tywin said, ending the conversation. Everyone stood up from their chairs and made to leave save for Tywin, Kevin, and Tyrion. When Cersei noticed her brother had stayed, she attempted to return to a chair. You were dismissed. Tywin told his daughter to her shock. She turned and walked out angrily. And what did you want? He said, turning his attention to his youngest child. I believe you know. Jaime was adamant about returning Sansa Stark to her mother. I had no such agreement with Lord Stark. As far as I'm concerned, he escaped. Tywin replied coldly. But you know he didn't. He was brought here by that giant woman on order from Lady Stark. I announced in front of court that I would trade Sansa for Jaime when I was acting hand. Does that mean anything to you? Tyrion said angrily. He was not Lady Stark's to give. What she hoped would happen is of little concern to me. If Lord Stark had requested the trade, I would have accepted, but because Lady Catelyn freed him against her son's wishes, I'm under no obligation to honor the deal. The girl is too valuable at this point to give her up just to make your brother feel better. More so, she is also your wife, or have you forgotten? You should spend more time trying to get her with child than trying to give her away. Tyrion looked straight into his father's cold green eyes. As you command, Lord Hand. He spat with more venom than normal before leaving him alone with his uncle. Tywin stood up and poured himself a cup of wine and then sat back down. What do we do now? Lord Free reneged on the plan and Lord Bolton is off plundering the Reach. We could send Lord Stark the letters between us, Roose Bolton and Walder Free. It might cause some infighting. Kevan said optimistically. No. Even as cowardly as they are, they serve more good as moles for now. We may have the opportunity to use them again against the Starks. Tywin said in a tired tone. After Lord Tarlis' defeat at Duskendale, I had to give out even more to seal our agreement. More gold, more titles, last-minute marriages agreements were made, and after all that it falls apart because Robb Stark sent Roose Bolton raiding in the Reach. Tywin said, raising his voice. Do you think it might be necessary to give our support to one of the other claimants to the Iron Islands? If Theon Greyjoy manages to gain control of the Iron Islands and give his support to Robb Stark, he may become too powerful to contain. He's been enough trouble with just the depleted forces of the Riverlands and one free city backing him. I fear to imagine how much trouble he would be with the Greyjoy navy. Kevan commented. We'd do more harm to their chances of winning if we backed someone. As of now, the Iron Throne is not strong enough to have any influence on the Iron Islands. But Balon Greyjoy attacked the North knowing full well what it could mean for his son. He spent his last year alienating his people to the North and died laying some mummer's farce of a claim to it. Balon's successor will be the one to make the same poor attempt at conquest, and that won't be Theon Greyjoy. Tywin responded confidently. Kevan didn't feel as certain about it as his brother, but he had learned a long time ago to trust his older brother. We may still have some luck in keeping the young wolf up north. I was told we've received several requests for aid from the Night's Watch. All of which went unanswered. It seems some Wilderling king is attempting to cross the wall. Lord Stark might have his hands full dealing with them and the Ironborn. Whether it takes another 3 months or 3 years, Robb Stark will fall. What I fear is what will come after. No matter what, there will be hard times ahead for the crown, and I have little faith in whoever will succeed us. My heir spent most of this war a prisoner to Robb Stark. My daughter started this whole war because she couldn't keep control of her son, and my youngest who'd rather spend his time drinking and whoring instead of ruling. If Cersei and Jaime had managed to keep a civil relationship with the Starks, we could have had Robb Stark as Joffrey's good brother instead of his enemy. Have you considered who Tommen will marry? If we are to give him Storm's End, it might be useful to find him a match in the Stormlands. I'm saving Tommen's marriage as a bargaining chip to deal with the strongest Vale house that is reluctant to accept Baelish's rule. Are you sure Tommen will be able to keep control of the Storm Lords without a marriage to one of their daughters? We can deal with stability further down the road. All that matters right now is putting an end to this war. Tywine said before he finished off his wine. How is Lancel faring? Better. He should be well enough to attend the wedding. He's taken up prayer while in the sickbed. Kevan replied. He was surprised his brother had asked. Even though he hid it well, Kevan could tell Tywine felt guilty about what happened to Kevan's two sons. One wounded at the Blackwater and the other killed by Lord Carstark. His sons had been a topic that both men had wanted to avoid for some time. How did he take the news of his betrothal to a Free? Tywine asked. Better than Devon did. Kevan said in a serious tone. Has Cersei come around to her marriage to Loras Tyrell? Tywine gave a joyless laugh in reply. Cersei's willfulness has gotten out of hand. She thinks herself as clever as you yet is nearly as reckless as that son of hers. She inherited Johanna's beauty but nothing of her judgment or wits. Cersei will not cause any more trouble after she is sent to Highgarden. Tywine replied slightly annoyed. Kevan prepared himself for a hostile response to what he was about to ask next. Have you given any more thought to an heir to the Rock? Jaime will rule the Rock after my death. Are you certain of that? He seemed rather set on remaining in the Kingsguard. He will come around. Jaime was meant for greater things than being a glorified bodyguard. And if he doesn't come around? What, you would have me make Tyrion my heir? Have me shame our family by making a drunkard Lord of Casterly Rock? Tywine yelled. You do not give him enough credit. Lancel tells me that he led the defense of King's Landing quite honorably during the battle. If Jaime does not accept his responsibility, then Cersei, or you, or Lancel will take possession of the Rock. But I will have it torn down before I make that fool my legacy. And if there's nothing else, you are excused. As you command. Kevan replied sadly. Chapter 13, The King's Will. Arya had been disappointed when she had woken up and arrived at the practice yard, to find Daisy had not been ready for her lesson. In fact, it had seemed that the entire castle was still asleep, save for the guards on duty. When she went to wake her instructor, the welcome she received was anything but gracious. Daisy threw her pillow at Arya when she attempted to get her out of bed. Arya made several attempts, but they all ended in failure. Unfortunately for Arya, the only person who was up alongside her was her mother. Sensing that any attempt at a conversation with her mother would be a bore, Arya instead spent the next 2 hours training on her own while the rest of the lords and ladies awoke. At about noon, her brother had called a meeting of all the lords for an announcement. Arya stood next to her mother while the lords walked into the great hall to hear Rob's announcement. Noble lords of the North and Riverlands. You all have sacrificed much and more to free our two kingdoms from the Mad King Joffrey and from the Iron Throne. So that this dream may continue even if I should fall in battle, I have summoned you all here to hear my will and listen to any objection to it. As you all know, my wife Talisa is with child. If I die, the child will assume the throne. Until its majority, I have decided a council of regents will rule in its stead. 7 people will make up this council. Lord Umber, Lord Marndale, and Lord Bolton will represent the North. Lord Blackwood, Lord Free, and Lord Bracken will represent the Riverlands. My wife the Queen will be the 7th member and represent our allies of Volantis. As Rob said the words, he had hoped it would never come to this. He had spent so much time thinking of something that might never come, but he could not risk it. He was only a man, and his next battle could very well be his last. It would have been so much simpler to just name Talisa as sole regent for their child, but he knew that the lords would never accept a foreigner ruling this kingdom that was barely staying together as is. His mother might have worked, but after she set the Kingslayer free, even the Riverlords would be reluctant to accept her. His uncle Edmure was out of the question, and even his great-uncle Brynden, who Rob had relied on so heavily, would alienate many of the northern lords. This mix of northern and river lords was his only hope of keeping these two kingdoms together while his child grew into the position. The most powerful northern lords would keep the north in line. Deciding the river lords had been a little harder. He knew if he named either Blackwood or Bracken, the other would have to be made a member as well, or he would surely anger the other one. Honestly, he would have to do something to end their feuding when he returned. He had contemplated making his uncle Edmure a member instead of Lord Free, but right now was not the time to test his new alliance. Moreover, it would have been redundant. If Edmure can keep control of his bannermen, he should be able to fill the role as a member in all but name. I have also decided to legitimize my half-brother Jon Snow. I will request that he be released from the Night's Watch. Robb waited for the murmurs in the crowd to settle. Many had questions, but nobody dared voice them before he was finished speaking. My brother is to be named my heir until my child is born. If my child does not survive, I ask that all of you, my loyal bannermen, accept him as king. He knew this would not go over well with the Riverlords, but hopefully his uncle could keep this together. Jon could marry a lady from the Riverlands to help seal them to him, if need be. Should Jon die without issue, my sister, the Princess Arya, will assume the throne. The same council as mentioned before will rule until she comes of age. I have also decided that my uncle, Edmure of House Tully, will be raised to the title of prince. If the Princess Arya dies without issue, my uncle will take the throne. Gods help us if it truly comes to this. In all honesty, this was truly only meant to soften the blow to Edmure's pride for what came next. Last, I have created a new position. My uncle, Brynden of House Tully, is hereby named Warden of the Southern Marches. All forces in the Riverlands, whether they be Northern, Riverland, or Volantis, will accept his commands as if they come from me. Any that defy him will be in direct defiance to me and be named a traitor. If any man can hold off the Lannisters in my absence, it is the Blackfish. I have made my will known. If any lord has any objection, let him say it now. Robb expected a shower of questions as soon as he had finished, but to his surprise only murmurs. He knew his mother wasn't thrilled with Jon being named heir, but she said nothing. He saw several lords look a little unhappy with the decisions, which ones in particular he knew not, but none seemed to care enough to voice them. Robb began to think back on his choices to guess who might voice a complaint. Both Bracken and Blackwood are named members. Lord Free was named a member and his daughter made a princess. The only other powerful house in the north not named was Karstark, and right now they are leaderless and not likely to support whatever decision I make. It was the Great Jon who finally ended all the murmuring. Gods, how can that man still stand after drinking so much? Robb thought. He pulled his sword from his sheath and spoke. If this be my king's wishes, then I accept. He then went to one knee. Soon many of the lords followed the Great Jon's example and bent the knee and confirmed his will. Arya began to feel weak in the knees. She had already been told that she was Robb's heir. But hearing Robb announce, in front of all his bannermen, her name in the line of succession suddenly made it all feel more real. The idea that all Robb's burdens might fall on her made her worries of her betrothal seem trivial in comparison. In the next hour the forces of the north began tearing down their camp and getting ready for the march to Moat Cailin. I sent 4,000 of my foot on ahead and will take another 4,000 mounted with me. With the Northern, Riverland, and Volantis forces combined, you should number near 20,000. If any of the Karstark men try and return, you have my leave to accept them back without question. Place them under the command of Willis Mandaeli. If they resort to becoming brogans, you may deal with them as you see fit. I leave you with a heavy responsibility, but if any man can do it, I know it is you, uncle. Robb said to his uncle Brynden. I will do all I can, your grace. Brynden replied to his nephew. How did Edmure take the news that you were given the command of all the forces in the Riverlands? Robb asked. He's much too enthralled with his new wife and hearing everyone call him Prince Edmure to be offended by my new position. It was a clever move of yours to give him a new title. Robb gave his uncle a sly smile before getting on his horse and marching the army out. They had arrived at Moat Cailin in good time. It has been Robb's hope to have his army in the north before the new year. His foot had arrived ahead of him and had already strengthened the siege that Lord Reed had started. A war council had been called as soon as camp had been made. Your Grace, the siege has been in full effect for about a fortnight. Sir Roderick has nearly 2,000 men on the northern side and is ready to attack on your word. I've ordered my men to guide small groups of men across the neck to help bolster his numbers. If we attack from both sides, we should be able to take the castle. We will take some heavy casualties, but the castle will fall by the end of the week. Lord Reed said. How heavy? Robb asked. No more than a 1,000. Howland Reed replied. We poisoned any group that has attempted to leave the castle in search of food. If their hunger hasn't broken their spirit, then the insects of the swamp will soon enough. 1,000 men seems a high price. How many men did you say hold the castle? Close to 100, Your Grace. We arrived right before Victorian Greyjoy left with most of his men. The losses would be heaviest on our side while we act as a distraction for the men on the northern side. I would prefer to avoid such losses if possible. Send one last peace offer. If they surrender the castle, the men inside will be given food and a safe passage back to the Iron Islands. If they deny this mercy, they will die in that castle. Your Grace, why show the Ironborn any mercy? They have shown our people none. Master Glover said angrily. It is because the Ironborn are in our lands that I make this deal. I care little for the men who hold the castle. It is the ones that reave across our coast, kill our people and rape our wives and daughters that I mean to see punished. Robb said as he slammed his fist on the table. The mention of those who had killed his brother went unsaid, but all present knew they were on his mind. In truth, Robb had little faith that his peace offer would work, but he was committed to making every attempt at keeping casualties down. Robin Flint was chosen to take the offer to the Ironborn. 5 minutes later he returned. Robb had fully expected to have to signal the attack when Robin returned, but to his surprise he received a different message. The man in charge was adamant in his refusal to surrender. I was about to leave when one of his own men opened his skull with an axe. The remaining Ironborn inside have all agreed to give up the castle, Your Grace. Robin said proudly. Several minutes later 66 tired and hungry men exited the castle and surrendered it to the king in the north. True to his word, Robb ordered each man be given a meal and be escorted to Seaguard in order to board a ship back to the Iron Islands. Many of the northern lords grumbled at this command, but no one questioned their king. Robb led his men through the castle to reunite with the army at the other side. Robb felt a strange mix of joy and sadness. Joy at returning to his homeland and sadness at knowing that this same homeland was being invaded and that even once the invaders were expelled he would need to return south. Even more troubling was the fact that winter was coming. His house words had never rung more true to him before. This damn war could not have come at a worse time. Most of the men who should have been making the final harvest before winter had been summoned to fight in Robb's war. And while freeing his father had been a noble goal, it did not change the fact that much of the final harvest had been left to rot in the fields. If the gods are merciful, we will have a short winter, but when are the gods ever merciful? We are coming out of a 10-year summer, and if the winter is anywhere near as long, we will not be able to feed everyone. Robb was greeted by cheers from the army at the other side. He saw the banners of House Sewin, Flint, Tallheart, Hornwood, and Marndale in the crowd. He ignored most of them as he looked for the face of his old master of arms. He found him in the back of the army with a look of deep shame. Your Grace, I cannot begin to ask forgiveness for what happened to your brothers. I know. He began to say. Robb felt that a better man might have tried to comfort him. A better man might have accepted the fault lied with himself for leaving the north open to attack and the castle so lightly defended, but Robb could not help and hold some anger for the man. An anger that Robb knew to be misplaced. He quickly resented himself for feeling how he did. I'm sorry about what happened to Beth. If she is alive, we will get her back. Robb said, interrupting his master-at-arms. Roderick was taken aback from Robb's response. Thank you, Your Grace. I would like to talk to you about what happened. Robb said. So he was escorted to the command tent with his mother and sister so that Roderick could recount what had truly befallen Winterfell. When the Ironborn attacked, we received a request for aid from Torrens Square. The Ironborn had attacked several villages on the stony shore and they did not have the men to expel them. Bran ordered us to help defend Torrens Square, so I took the castle garrison and raised 2,000 men to deal with the Ironborn. He said with guilt in his voice. When we returned, I found that several of the neighboring farms had been burned and the castle had been sacked. He strained himself to recount what happened next. When we entered the castle, all the men had been killed. We found your brothers' bodies burned and hanged in the courtyard. Lady Catelyn began to cry at the mention of the death of her 2 youngest sons. Arya only felt a deep sense of rage at the Ironborn who had killed her brothers. Rickon had only been 5 and Bran was a cripple. What kind of person would murder a cripple and a child? I understand if your grace wishes to remove me from my position. I accept responsibility for what happened. Sir Roderick said in shame. You did all you could. Bran did what he thought was right as acting lord, and I cannot blame you for following his orders. Bran did his duty to his people. Had I left you with more men to protect Winterfell, this might have been avoided, but I cannot afford to worry about what may have been. Has the castle been repaired yet? Robb asked. The walls were not that badly affected. Most of the castle has been restored, but Wintertown was put to the torch. I left Cleesewin in charge with 300 men. Good. We can worry about the repairs to Wintertown once the North has been freed from the Ironborn. I'm sending you back with my mother, sister, and wife to Winterfell with 300 men. Under no circumstance should the castle garrison ever number less than 300. Understood, Your Grace. I have nearly 8,000 men. 2,000 will be left under the command of Robin Flint to hold Moat Cailin from any further invaders. Galbart Glover will take 2,000 men to liberate his home from the Ironborn. I will take 2,000 men and destroy any Ironborn forces along the Stony Shore. Lastly, my good father will take 2,000 Unsullied and sail home to Volantis to deal with their domestic problems. I have ordered the lords to leave behind the youngest men and those who have been injured. They are to summon the oldest men in their lands to take their place and return to Winterfell once they have dealt with the Ironborn. 500 able-bodied men should remain in Deepwood Motte, Torrens Square, and Barrowton to deter against more raiding. Robb, why would you want a whole bunch of old people in your army? Arya interrupted. Robb sighed as he began to explain his actions. We are not as prepared for this winter as is necessary. When I march back south, many of those men will not return to their families. I would rather it be the old men so that the next generation may have a chance at life. Those are people you're talking about. She screamed as she grabbed her older brother and tried to shake him. Robb placed his hand on his sister. And I hope you never have to look at them as anything else. But as king I can't worry about every single man. Many must die if the rest are to survive. He had remembered his father telling him of old men among the mountain clans who would claim to go out hunting in the middle of winter and never return home in order to unburden his family of another mouth to feed. You will have little trouble dealing with Ironborn on the Stony Shore. I received word from Leopold Tallheart that a man claiming to be your good brother arrived with 50 ships and crushed all the Ironborn longships on the coast. Robb smiled at the welcome news. I assume you have heard that I married a woman from Volantis. The Triacs of Volantis have sent aid to help their kin. I am most excited to meet my wife's brother. Yes, Your Grace, I had heard the news about your marriage, but much of the alliance has only been speculation until now. So it seems we now have a good chance of dealing with the Ironborn before Joffrey's wedding. Your Grace, I was wondering if you had considered what to do about the problem at the wall. What problem? Robb asked as his eyes quickly switched from joy to anger. I'm sorry, I thought you had been informed. We received a raven from Castle Black. A wilderling army numbering near 100,000 marches on the wall. I had not the men to send aid and hold the siege. Robb was about to reprimand the man for not doing more, but realized how pointless that would have been now. He pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration. Sometimes he felt that good news could only come with bad news. He could not remember the last day in which he had only been given positive news. We will take 500 men from the two armies marching west and make a fifth army. I will take the army to White Harbor and we will sail to Eastwatch by the sea. The Great Jon will take up command of the forces to march to the Stony Shore. I love you. Talisa said to her husband as she kissed him. Gods, I wish I could take you with me. He said as he kissed her back. I don't think little Eddard would be too happy about that. She replied as she put her hand of her stomach. She had only now begun to show the first signs of being with child. I can't wait to meet him. Robb said warmly as he placed his hand on top of Talisa's. Will you do me a favor and watch over my sister for me? My mother is in a dark place right now and is more likely to smother Arya than give her what she needs. She seems to like you and I think she will listen to you. I need you to prepare her for ruling if that day may come. You worry too much, do you know that? You have yet to lose a single battle, yet you're always ready for the worst. It helps to be prepared. Well, you will return to me to see your son. You do not have my leave to die, she said playfully. As my queen commands, he replied with a smile. But as far as your sister I will do all I can. But I do not see that girl changing who she is. In 10 years you might have better use for her as a warrior than as a lady. Oh, has she convinced you of this too? Rob laughed as he kissed her again. I want to go with you, Arya demanded. It's going to be boring at Winterfell. Yes, well, sometimes ruling is boring. It's something you have yet to learn. I've told Roderick to continue your training if he has time, and Malachi has agreed to send someone to Bravos to find you a new instructor. He then handed Arya the sword she had stabbed the Lannister soldier with. Now I'm giving you this back to you because I believe I can trust you with it. This is for defense and not to stab anyone you feel like. You are a princess and you have certain responsibilities. Talisa will soon have the baby to worry about, and mother still has not recovered from Bran and Rickon's death. It may fall on you to handle more duties at Winterfell. I need to know you're going to listen to Talisa and mother. Rob, I can do more than just help Talisa. I could squire for you. I'm probably better than Elmar is with a sword. No. Rob replied harshly. I don't have need for another squire. What I need is to have an heir so that everyone knows where to turn should I fall. Jon is not yet freed of his vows and my child is yet to be born. Right now you are my heir and that job is the most important thing you can do right now. Arya resigned her head in defeat. I know it's hard right now. But this war will be over eventually. Rob said in a much softer voice. Soon I will come back with Jon and then we will get Sansa back. My child will come before long and you will be an aunt. It will be like our family is whole again. We might even build a snow castle this winter. We could have a snow fight and you, Sansa, mother, and Talisa, could go against me and Jon. Then we can spend our nights drinking out cider. Rob wasn't sure if he was trying to comfort his sister at this point or just dreaming for the life he wanted for himself. Just promise me you'll come back, she said as she hugged her brother. I promise. Now promise me you'll watch out for mother and Talisa. I promise, she replied proudly as she gripped Needle tightly. Chapter 14, The Last Baratheon. I assume you are quite happy to see your father again, Rob said to Wendell Marndaly. I'm sorry that your brother won't have the chance to see his 2 daughters. Yes, that is a shame, but someone had to stay in the Riverlands to keep the Northerners together. House Marndaly knows its duty, he said proudly. Rob began to see the city in the distance on the other side of the White Knife. He had sent scouts ahead to notify Lord Marndaly to his arrival. He had prepared several large ships to ferry the army across the river. When his army entered the city they were given a most gracious welcome. All the people in the town cheered them on as they made their way into Newcastle. While I'm grateful for your most gracious welcoming, you did not need to throw us a parade, Rob said to Lord Marndaly. Of course I did, Your Grace. Your subjects have heard of your many victories against the Lannisters and have waited for the chance to celebrate them, Lord Marndaly said joyfully. By the gods, he is fat. Now I know why they say he cannot ride a horse. As I'm sure you've heard, the Night's Watch has requested aid. I had, Your Grace, he replied in a far more serious tone. Had I the men I would have sent them, but we've had some trouble keeping order after what happened with Lord Bolton's bastard. What did he do? Rob asked, surprised. You were not told. He took Lady Hornwood hostage and married her against her will. He tried to lay claim to her lands. I had my cousin take possession of the castle in order to keep it from the vile bastard's hands. Does no one feel the need to inform me of these things? Rob thought angrily. When Sir Roderick slew the bastard, I thought the trouble would end there, but his men have been encroaching on Hornwood land. White Harbor is full of people fleeing from the Bolton men. I have no idea who rules them now, but they have been causing trouble for months now. I have been reluctant to bring my men back from Hornwood. But now that you are here to settle the matter, I have no problem with sending my forces to aid the Night's Watch. I have brought my own forces to bolster the wall's defenses. All that I need is ships to sail up to Eastwatch. How have the ships I asked you to build come along? Lord Marndaly returned to his joyous tone. Better than expected. You actually came across the White Knife on one of the ships in your new navy. We have 45 ships ready and hope to have the 46th ready by the new year. I assumed those had been merchant cogs. You have gone far beyond what was expected of you. We plundered large amounts of gold from the Westerlands. I promise you will be compensated greatly. You are too kind, Your Grace. It was your ancestors that sheltered my family when we were beset and friendless. We were driven from our homes and the wolves took us in and nourished us. They protected us from our enemies. This city was built upon the land that your family gave us. And because of that we swore, before the old gods and new, that we would always be Stark men. That debt can never be repaid, but I have tried to do my part to honor it. The gold, Your Grace, will be incredibly useful. I took the liberty of minting silver coins for your new kingdom. I turned all the silver I had into coins. We have 50,000 silver trouts ready to be spread through your kingdom. Unfortunately, I did not have enough gold until now to start making coins in large numbers. Lord Mandaeli pulled 2 coins out of his pocket and offered them to his king for inspection. Rob looked at the coins placed in his hands. The silver coin had the trout of House Tully on one side. The words North and Riverlands ran along both sides of the trout. On the reverse Rob saw the face of a man. Even though his name was written above the face, it took him a second to fully understand that it was his face on the coin. He then looked at the gold coin and saw the same thing, only with a dire wolf instead of a trout. Once we get enough copper, I can start making copper coins as well. If it is not too bold of me, suggest we could place a heart tree and the 7-point star on your copper coins. I approve. You will have all the materials you need to make coins. You have truly proven yourself today, Rob said as he returned the coins. I'm sure you wish to rest, but I thought it best to let you know that we had a man arrive who wished to speak with you. He claims to have been Lord Stannis, Hand of the King. You were right to tell me. I will see him now. If you could have the ships prepared, I would like to have my men and horses ready to set sail today. So soon? We were going to have a feast to celebrate your return. Lord Mandaeli replied, confused. You honor me beyond words, but the Night's Watch has gone without assistance for too long. My brother is at Castle Black and I will not risk him being hurt. Lord Mandaeli began to laugh. Wish I was young enough and still able to ride a horse. I would love to ride with such a fierce king into battle. I pity those wildlings that you find in your path, Your Grace. Rob was escorted into the Great Hall and given the Lord's seat in order to hear his guests. Lord Mandaeli then sat next to Rob and ordered that the man be brought to give his message to the king. Rob saw an older man with a salt and pepper beard and no fingers on his left hand enter the merman's court. He was followed by a beautiful woman with red hair wearing a red dress. Rob's own red hair looked more brown than red in comparison to the woman's. He noticed a deep emptiness in the woman. Emptiness that seemed to mask some of her beauty. I'm told that you claim you once served as hand to Stannis Baratheon. From what I have been told, Lord Stannis is dead. Killed by the ghost of his own brother, if the rumors can be believed. So my lord, what is it you have come here to ask of me? Thank you, Your Grace, for hearing me out. I am Sir Davos Seaworth and I served as hand to Stannis Baratheon, first of his name, and rightful king of Westeros. In the months after the Battle of the Blackwater, the lords began to fight over what course of action to take. Lord Florent seized power a fortnight ago and attempted to trade Stannis' daughter, the Princess Shireen, to the Lannisters. I and others loyal to Stannis took the princess and came here. I've come here asking you to support her claim to the Iron Throne. Rob looked at the man and could see the passion in which he spoke. Unfortunately, he already knew what his answer would be, what it would have to be. Everyone save for Lord Mandaeli out. He commanded. After all but Sir Davos, the Red Woman, Lord Mandaeli, and Rob himself were removed from the Great Hall, he spoke. I sent my mother to treat with Renly Baratheon. She returned claiming that she saw him murdered by a shadow with the face of Stannis Baratheon. Do you deny what he did? Do you deny that he was a kinslayer? Rob asked the man plainly. Davos was silent for a moment as he looked for the words to answer with. He reached for the bag of finger bones that used to hang around his neck and remembered they were no longer there. You say he was a kinslayer. I will not deny it. He used magic to kill his own brother. But if I'm correct, you too have been called a kinslayer. You executed Lord Karstark with your own sword. Was House Carstark not of distant kin to House Stark? That has different. Lord Carstark broke the law. He killed hostages under my uncle's own roof. So did Renly. Stannis was Renly's older brother. By all the laws of gods and men the throne belonged to him. He didn't want it. No more than he wanted to kill his brother. But he was the lawful heir and meant to see that the law was fulfilled. What else would you call it when a younger brother usurps what is his older brother's by right, but a breach of law? Renly broke the law and was punished for it. Just as Lord Carstark was punished for his crimes. Robb said nothing as he thought on what Sir Davos said. Let me ask you, Your Grace. Do you know why your Lord Father was killed? He learned of Joffrey's true parentage and the Queen killed him because of it. Yes, but before he died he sent a letter to King Stannis telling him of the truth. It was his commitment to honor Stannis' claim, the true claim, to the throne that cost your father his life. Now I stand here before you to honor what your father died for. Robb was taken aback by the man's argument. Deep down Robb knew he was going against what his father would have wished, but hearing the accusation being said out loud somehow made it feel worse. You may be right, Sir Davos. What happened to Renly may have been punishment for usurping his brother's throne. And backing Stannis' claim is what my father died for, but my lords have made me king and I will not undo what they have done. We have decided to free ourselves from the Iron Throne and I will not ask my people to die in order to put someone else on a foreign throne. If the Lannisters will meet my demands I mean to give them peace. To Robb's surprise Sir Davos did not seem that distraught by the news. In truth I did not believe you would. But I was Stannis' man and I had to at least try. I however wish to make a smaller request. Ask it. I still seek shelter for the Princess Shireen. As long as she lives she will be a threat to Joffrey's reign. I refuse to abandon her to the Lannisters. She has told me of how cruel Joffrey was to her as a child and that was with King Robert to keep him in line. I dare not think on what he would be like as king. Robb was hit hard by Sir Davos' request as he thought of his own sister who remained a hostage of the Lannisters. I brought with me 4 ships and 200 men loyal to the true heir. I will give it all to your cause if you would promise me that you will shelter the Princess Shireen from her enemies. Robb smiled. This request he could fulfill. The men and ships are welcome but unnecessary. He then stood up from his chair. Sir Davos Seaworth, I Robb Stark, first of my name, King in the North and of the Trident, Lord of Winterfell, do hereby swear to you in the name of the old gods and knew that the Princess Shireen Baratheon will be under my protection. She will be cared for as if she were my own blood. No treaty with any person nor kingdom will be made that endangers her. This I swear to you for this day and all the days to come. Thank you, Your Grace. Davos said in a grateful manner. He made to exit the great hall. Wait. Robb said as he pointed his finger at the Red Women. I assume you are the fire priestess that convinced King Stannis to follow this fire god I have heard so much about. My name is Melisandre. And yes, I turned his grace to the one true god. She replied calmly. And I assume it was your magic that killed Lord Renly. It was. She replied without so much as a flinch. Robb felt his heart quicken as she admitted to what she had done. He prayed to the gods that his fear did not show. Why have you come to me? I once believed that Stannis was the Lord of Light's chosen. I now know I was mistaken. The visions I see in the fire have shown me that the real battle lays up north. I have come here to see what the Lord of Light plans for me. And what makes you think I would allow you to stay in my kingdom? You have admitted to me of having used blood magic in order to kill Lord Renly. Letting you stay in the north would pose a danger to myself. King Stannis listened to me because I was useful to him. I could be useful to you as well. And what would you want in return for this usefulness? Robb asked skeptically. Only the ability to serve you. The Lord of Light has shown you in my visions. Your Grace has his part to play in the war against the Great Other. Robb was silent after she had finished speaking. Is it mere flattery or does she truly believe I have some grand purpose in her plans? Fine, I will allow you to stay in my kingdom on one condition. You will. You want me to stop the rebellion in Volantis? Melisandre said before Robb was able to finish his sentence. Robb was at a loss for words. He had just thought of the idea himself a few seconds ago. I saw a vision that I would return to the great temple of Volantis in order to speak on your behalf. So do you believe you can accomplish this task? I'm not sure. I sought out Stannis on my own accord without approval from the High Priestess. How she will feel towards me is an unknown. Have you not seen what will happen in your visions? Robb asked in a condescending tone. I see only what the Lord of Light wills. And even then it is up to me to interpret the messages in the fire. Very well. You may go. I will have a ship readied for you. If you could bring the Princess Shireen here, I would like to meet her. Robb said. Of course, Your Grace. Sir Davos said as he bowed. He and Melisandre then turned to leave the Great Hall. Do you think it wise to work with a witch like that, Your Grace? Lord Marndaly asked. I will not put my faith in her the way Stannis did, but if she has the powers she claims, I would rather have her as an ally than an enemy. As you say, Your Grace. It had been half an hour later when Sir Davos returned at the side of the Princess Shireen, followed by several guards that wore the Baratheon stag that was engulfed in fire on their chest. Robb noticed the girl had a mix of fear and embarrassment on her face. It wasn't hard for Robb to guess from where those feelings came. Her father had been killed in battle and now she was forced to leave her home in order to stay alive. And while it was sad to say she was not a practically attractive young girl, her face was scarred by grayscale, which probably put her at the end of many jokes from other children. Robb walked over to the young girl and went to a knee so that he might look her in the eyes. He saw great sadness in them. Your father was a good man, Princess. My father spoke highly of his skill and determination. Robb left out the part about his father speaking about his stubbornness and lack of mercy. I know you must be scared after what happened, but I assure you, you are safe here, Princess. Shireen looked into the young king's blue eyes and wanted to believe him so much. She had been so terrified over the last couple of months. First her father had died and then her mother had gone mad. The lords at Dragonstone that had survived the battle had fought over control and tried to sell her to the Lannister. She wanted so very much to believe what he said. Thank you, Your Grace. Robb stood up and looked at Sir Davos. I will have the Princess Shireen sent to Winterfell. You may send 20 of your men with her as a personal guard. That will not be necessary, Your Grace. I'm fully willing to commit all my men to your cause. I only wish to send my wife, youngest sons and her fool with her. Davos replied. Robb was taken by surprise by the man's trust. I have been given a request for aid from the Night's Watch. I plan on sailing to the Wall to stop some king beyond the Wall. Then my men and I will follow you to the Wall. But first the princess has a gift to give you in thanks for your hospitality. Sir Davos turned his head and signaled to someone. Devan. A young boy no older than 13, from what Robb could guess, walked over to the princess and handed her a sword. She took the sword and in turn handed it to Robb. This was my father's sword. He named it Lightbringer. I gift it to you as a thanks for your hospitality. I would be honored if you took it into battle. Robb took the sword from the young girl and was at a loss for words. He wanted to tell her that any gift was unnecessary, but at that point it felt disrespectful. You honor me, princess. As he thanked her, he pulled the sword out of the sheath ever so slightly and was astonished to find that the blade glowed. He immediately pulled the sword out in its entirety and the courtroom was covered in light. I see why your father named the sword as he did, Robb said as he continued to marvel at it. I need to speak to the king. A man shouted as he tried to move past the Baratheon men. Two of Robb's Unsullied instinctively stepped forward to stop him. Gendry, this is not the time, Sir Davos said to the young man. My lord, I met your sister when I left King's Landing. I know where Arya is. Or at least where she was before I was separated from her. He blurted out. Robb examined the man for a moment. He was nearly as tall as Robb and had broad shoulders. He looked as if he could wrestle an ox if he wanted to. It took Robb several seconds to make the connection to this man and the stories his sister had told him. You're Gendry. How did you know that? The man replied with a look of confusion. Gendry, that is no way to speak to a king. My sister Arya told me of you. She said she traveled with you and another boy. Robb took a short amount of time to try and remember the other boy's name. Hot Pie was it? So Arya made it back to Winterfell. She did. Thank you for your concern. As I understand, Arya met you in a group traveling to the Night's Watch before you were taken by the Lady Melisandre, I assume. Rob felt the word lady come out uncomfortably. Was it your intent to take the black? No, your grace. I was a blacksmith's apprentice in King's Landing. My master sold me to the Night's Watch. I resented him for a while, but now I realize he was just trying to protect me. Gendry said sadly. Protect you from what? From the Queen. I'm King Robert's son. Gendry struggled to say the last part. He realized it was the first time he had said it to anyone. Rob realized that this young man must have been what King Robert looked like in his youth. Our fathers were great friends. It was their friendship that kept the kingdom together. If there is something you would wish from me, ask it. If it is with my power to grant it, I will. No, your grace. I once thought I would be part of the Brotherhood without banners. But they sold me to the Red Woman for a couple pieces of gold. It was Sir Davos that saved me. I have decided to follow him so that I might earn a knighthood. Gendry replied humbly. So be it. Rob then turned his attention back to Sir Davos. I will make sure your men are given proper clothing for the cold. We will be setting sail within the hour. I suggest you say your goodbyes to your wife and sons. Of course, your grace. Sir Davos kissed his wife, Maria, as they began to get ready to depart. His grace tells me that you will be taken to Winterfell with the princess. He expressed his hopes that you would help his wife with their child after she gives birth. Of course. Maria replied. Hopefully this queen is not as crazy as the last. Davos then gave Shireen a hug and handed her a wooden stag that he had carved for her. Will my cousin Gendry and Devan not be coming with me? She asked sadly. No, my princess. Devan is my squire and Gendry wishes to earn a knighthood. Sir Davos replied. Perhaps it might be best if the princess was accompanied by a friend. Surely Gendry could squire for you instead. Melisandre said as she placed a surprisingly friendly hand on the princess' shoulder. I believe Devan will want to fight with all the other men. Davos replied half-heartedly. But of course his first responsibility is to his queen. Is it not? She replied. Davos found it hard to argue this point, and for once he didn't really want to. He had lost 4 sons already. As much as it pained him, he was grateful for the Red Woman's suggestion. But I want to go to the war with you. Devan complained to his father. I know you want to, but your duty is to the Princess Shireen. Davos said as he placed his hand on his son's shoulder. No one doubts your courage. You stood next to Stannis' side after he was struck down. You made sure his grace's body was returned to Dragonstone so that he could be put to rest. I assure you there will be more battles to fight. We are sworn to Robb Stark now, and his war with the Lannister still continues. Robb sat in at the head of the table in Lord Marndalis Solar as they discussed their plans. I know you feel this task beneath you, but I want to make sure the princess makes it to Winterfell safely. Robb said to Daisy Mormont, who stood at the end of the table. I understand, your grace. She said reluctantly. My sister will be most excited to have her instructor back. If you have the time, I would like you to continue her lessons. But more importantly, tell Arya that I expect her to be friendly to the Princess Shireen. Of course, your grace. Robb looked Daisy in eye. I need you to stress this. The princess has been through a lot, and Arya is not to behave the way she did towards our own sister. You are to take 20 men and leave on the morrow with the princess and Sir Davos' family. As you command. She said before bowing. Lord Marndaly, how many of your men do you have dealing with the Bolton men? About 300. Most of which hold Castle Hornwood. I have no heir as of now to place in charge of Hornwood lands. Both Harleys and Darren are dead. For now you will maintain the Hornwood lands. Lord Bolton is now in the Reach and cannot bring whoever remains in charge of his men to order. I will leave you with the Unsullied my good father was going to take to Volantis. I've had your maester draw up a royal decree ordering whoever holds the Dread Fort to surrender it to your men. I promise you, your grace, that we will bring order back to your kingdom. Lord Marndaly said proudly. Good. Winter is coming and we can't afford to be divided. Chapter 15, The Young Wolf and the White Wolf. Rob looked on from the back of the lead ship at the new Northern Armada. He was the first Stark since Brandon the Burner to have any power at sea. He knew that as of now his navy paled in comparison to the navies of the South, but he could not help but marvel at it all the same. Rob had tried to focus on the problems that lay directly ahead of him. Usually this consisted of the next battle or next disgruntled lord, but ever since he had returned home he began to think on challenges that might lay ahead. He had been raised to rule the North for the Iron Throne. Now he had to contemplate the idea of ruling the North and Riverlands as an independent kingdom. The idea made Rob sick to his stomach. Ruling and being the one thing that he had not been proven adept at. The battles, which at the beginning had seemed the most challenging, now barely worried Rob. The goal of liberating the North was all but accomplished. He had managed to bring most of his forces home to defeat a much weaker and divided enemy. The goal of making a peace with the Iron Throne seemed like it might become a reality. He had a navy, was in a position to call up new levies, and he had an undefeated record. Rob began to think on the challenges that might lay ahead as he ruled in New Kingdom. First, food would need to be gathered. Winter was nearly here and he knew neither the North nor the Riverlands had sufficient stores to last anything more than a 3-year winter, and they were just now finishing a 10-year summer. Half of the last crops had gone unharvested in the North and been burned in the Riverlands. Food will have to be imported, that Rob knew for sure. Many lords had made a small fortune during this war from plundering the Westerlands and from ransoms paid. But this was nowhere near the kind of money that would be needed to buy the amount of food required to feed 2 kingdoms. The Vale has been untouched by war, but my aunt has been reluctant to give any kind of aid before now. It would be overly optimistic to expect her to help me during winter. I have allies in Essos now, but who's to say that their generosity won't run out soon enough? Surely they will start wanting things in return. Trade deals, gold, help in fighting their wars. Rob began to realize just how unprepared he was to rule his kingdom. Luckily he was spared the need to dread on the idea any longer. Your Grace. Sir Davos said as he walked up behind Rob. Yes, Sir Davos. I thought you might want to know that we are a day out from Eastwatch. It seems the winds have been in your favor, Your Grace. Thank you. Sir Davos turned to leave the king to his thoughts but was stopped. Sir Davos. Yes, Your Grace. I wished to ask you about the Lady Melisandre. What of her, Your Grace? I will not argue the merits of what Stannis did. Both he and his brother are dead now. What I wish to know, was it his idea to use blood magic to kill Renly, or did the Lady Melisandre that convinced him of it? Stannis knew that pressing his claim to the throne would mean Renly would need to die. But I truly believed Stannis wished to defeat his brother through battle. But when Lady Melisandre told him that he could win without a single blade being swung, Stannis was unable to refuse. So you believe it was the Lady Melisandre that tempted him? Davos was silent for a moment as he tried to form the right words. Stannis was committed to winning the war regardless of the cost. She did fill his head with prophecies and warnings of a long night that would consume us all. She told him he was some chosen savior, but in the end all she did was give Stannis the means to defeat Renly. I resented her for the dark magic she offered, but it would be unfair to say she made Stannis do anything. It's sad. Stannis never loved either of his brother, but he never wanted them dead. He never even wanted to be king. He just wanted what was his. Renly saw Robert's death as an opportunity, while Stannis only thought of it as a burden. Rob thought on what Davos had said. Well, for all of Stannis' faults he was no fool. He knew what being a king was. Nothing more than a burden. Mayhaps he and I had more in common than I once thought. So you tell me that she was merely an instrument that Stannis used. But she believed that Stannis was her savior. Now that she has agreed to help me, what do you think she wants? To serve her god. And as of now that goal lines up with yours. So do you believe I can trust her? Rob asked, finally getting to the heart of what he needed to know. Had you asked me a week ago I would have said no. But it was the Red Woman who rallied her followers to free me and the princess from Lord Florent. Less than half the men that I brought were truly loyal to Stannis' memory. Most were Queen's men. Loyal to the wishes of Arla and to whatever she says those wishes are. She could have had her followers do anything she wanted, yet she chose to save me and the princess. I believe there is still some compassion in her. You didn't answer my question. No, I didn't, but I fear that is the most I can say for her. I'm indebted to her for saving me and the princess, but it is up to you to judge whether she is trustworthy or not. Rob frowned at Sir Davos' answer but accepted it. He then retired to his cabin to sleep. He had been haunted on this voyage by his last conversation with Melisandre. I suggest you hurry to your brother. I have seen him in my visions. The White Wolf surrounded by fire. Out of the flames his enemies came until finally they killed him. Tell me, if this is a vision of the future, then why does it matter what I do? Is my brother not doomed regardless? To Rob's surprise, she only smiled at his skepticism. The Lord of Light sends me visions of what may happen. If you change your actions because of them, a new vision may come to me. Rob would have dismissed her claims right there if it had not been for Grey Wind. His direwolf had been more skeptical than any of his bannermen. He would growl and show his teeth at anyone he deemed untrustworthy. To Rob's shock, he acted as friendly as a pup in Lady Melisandre's presence. He sniffed her hand before licking it in a playful manner. It was this action that had convinced Rob to consider her words. It had been late at night when they had arrived at Eastwatch. Cotter Pike had welcomed him with all the courtesy that could be expected from a hardened Ironborn bastard. His men had been looking forward to a night's rest. Unfortunately for his personal guard, they would have to wait. Their king had wanted to head out as soon as they landed. Small Janumba was placed in charge of the remaining forces while the king led a force of 50 men on ahead. Even some of his most loyal men cursed him under their breath for the grueling pace he set. They traveled nearly 50 miles each day and had only been given 5 hours to rest for the next day's ride. Many, including the king, feared they would kill the horses. On the third day they had arrived. Castle Black could be seen in the distance from the hill their horses stood on. When Rob saw the castle, it had been as if his deepest fears had come true. He has arrived to see the castle up in flames. A small band of attackers looked as if they had just pushed their way into the castle. Rob wasted no time as he ordered his men to attack. He raised the new sword he had been gifted with and its light showed brightly. The adrenaline and their king's spirit kept the tired men of his party going as they charged into Castle Black. Their entrance and Rob's flaming sword surprised both friend and foe alike. It was easy to distinguish the enemy as they rode in. The fire reflected off the black leather of the men from the night's watch. The furs of the wildlings remained dull in the firelight. The wildlings soon became outnumbered as reinforcements poured into the castle. The men of the Night's Watch rallied together as victory seemed to be within their grasp. The wildlings fought back onto front valiantly, but their numbers soon dwindled. His men spread out across the castle and even into the tunnel to support the men of the Night's Watch. It was this appearance of victory that allowed the king in the north to become overconfident. He was taken by surprise when his horse fell dead underneath him. He saw the arrow sticking out of its eye and looked up to see where it came from. He looked on in front of him and saw a woman with red hair preparing to fire another arrow. Had he been any other person, she might have had a chance to kill him, but he was a king, and a Stark king at that. If Grey Wind had not attacked her when he did, then she would have found herself facing 10 men of Rob's personal guard. They had quickly formed up on their king to ensure no harm came to him. To Rob's shock, she managed to dodge Grey Wind's charge. Unfortunately for her, an arrow struck her in the stomach as soon as she stood back up. Rob saw that the arrow came from one of his own men. He looked at Rob as he readied another arrow, asking if he should finish her. Rob signaled to him to stand down as he walked over to the woman. His men moved out of the way as the danger seemed to have passed. "It's over. Drop the bow and you can live." Rob looked on as she ignored his words and continued to try and stand. She clutched her bow as she managed to get to her knees. "You've fought bravely, but it's over. Give up." "Never," she yelled. Rob sighed as he lowered his head in acceptance. So be it. Some people preferred a warrior's death than to surrender, he knew. Regardless, he was not going to let her take any of his men to the grave. Rob raised his sword to finish her. "Grit, yield," a voice cried out. Rob turned to see his brother running up towards the woman. "Please, Grit. It's over." Rob wasn't sure if his brother's words managed to reason with her or if her body just gave out, but regardless, she dropped her bow. His brother ran over to her and caught her before she fell to the ground. He picked her up and rushed her into the castle. Rob was about to follow John but was kept from it by one surviving wilderling. He walked over to find a large man with a red beard thrashing a spear around. Several men from the Night's Watch surrounded the man but they were all reluctant to attack him. Rob signaled to one of his own men and the wilderling was brought down by an arrow to the leg. There was uneasy calm amongst the men as the final wilderling came down. Rob was the one to break the silence. "Who is in charge here?" The men looked at each other in confusion. Finally one of the men managed to speak. "Sir Alistair Thorne is the senior member but he was injured. Jon Snow took command but I know not where he is." Another man who was being supported by Lucas Blackwood. Rob wanted more than anything to see his brother but someone needed to bring order to the men. Rob took charge and began ordering the men. He had his own men tend to the wounded and ordered the dead be burned. There had only been 2 wilderling survivors. Jon had taken one and the other had been put in the ice cells. He had sent 15 of his men to the top of the wall to relieve the men there and to get a report. 30 minutes later several men came down claiming that the wall had been secured. It was at that point Rob finally felt comfortable leaving to go see his brother. Rob asked for one of the men to take him to see his brother. An incredibly fat man offered and Rob followed him into the castle. Rob's squire Elmar, Patrick Mallister, and Sander Clegane all followed Rob. They came to the only room that had a candle burning. "I have cleaned and bandaged the wound. All she needs now is rest. I've given her some milk of the poppy to help her deal with the pain," the maester said. "Thank you, Maester Eamon," Jon replied as he knelt down next to the bed. Rob stared at his brother in silence for several moments. He had known as soon as his brother spoke the woman's name that Jon had loved her. He said her name the same way Rob said Talisa's name when he was separated from her. A deep sense of longing could be heard in his voice. As if it physically hurt him to speak her name. Rob had been more than surprised that his brother had become intimate with a woman at the wall. He had remembered Theon mocking Jon 4 days after he had taken Jon to the brothel in Wintertown. Jon had left the whore's room as soon as she had undressed. "I'd never thought Jon to be one to break his vows for a woman. But perhaps he would think the same of me," Rob thought as he realized the irony. "Jon," Rob said in a low voice. His brother stood up and faced him. "Rob," he replied in shock. During the battle he had heard a voice that sounded like his brother's but he had dismissed it. The light that reflected off the man's sword masked his face and Jon was far too concerned with grit to give it a second thought at the time. Rob embraced his brother in a hug before Jon truly understood what had happened. "Wait, what is the hound doing here?" Jon asked when he saw the man's burned face. "Easy," Rob said, placing a hand over Jon's as he made to raise his sword. "He abandoned the Lannisters. He fights for me now." Sander only gave a low growl in reply. Rob's squire pulled up a chair and the 2 men sat down. "What are you doing here? I heard you went south to fight the Lannisters," Jon asked. Rob then began to tell his story. "When news of father's execution reached us I knew we could no longer follow Joffrey. Both Stannis and Renly had taken up arms against him. Stannis with the better claim and Renly with the larger army. It was the great Jon who came up with our answer. Why shouldn't we rule over our own? I ought to have had Grey Wind rip out his fucking throat. Only a fool would want to be a king," Rob said, allowing the true burden of his crown to show for the first time. "From what you have told me it seems you've taken to your crown quite well. Undefeated in battle. Father would be proud," Jon said, attempting to reassure his brother. A small smile formed on Rob's face. "The battles have been the easy part. It's the ruling that I have made a mess of. I've failed to avenge father, failed to protect our brothers," Rob said as his anger boiling over. Jon looked at his brother in confusion. "Rob, Bran is alive. What are you talking about?" Roderick saw his burnt body when they returned to Winterfell. "I don't know what Roderick saw but one of my brothers talked to him as he passed the wall. He was traveling with Hodder, Summer, and 2 others." "Did he have Rickon with him?" Rob asked hopefully. "No. But if Bran survived the sack of Winterfell it would make sense that Rickon did as well. He could be hiding out at another castle. He just let a cripple go north of the wall," Rob yelled angrily. "They told him Bran had to get north of the wall. John replied. What possible reason could Bran have for needing to go north of the wall? He said he was the only one that could stop the White Walkers. John said, just now realizing how odd it sounded when said out loud. White Walkers. Has your friend gone mad? He let Bran go north to deal with some nursemaid's tale. It's not a tale. I've seen them. The dead are rising and they are coming for all of us. John said to his brother in a grave tone. Have you gone mad as well? Those are just stories old Nan used to tell us. Don't tell me they are just stories. I've seen them with my own eyes. Robb stared into his brother's eyes and saw a level of fear he had only seen in the eyes of men about to die. John waited for his words to sink into his brother. We captured a wildling woman who tried to kill Bran. Before I marched south, she told me I was marching my army the wrong way. She told me that the dead were rising beyond the wall. Robb gave a sad chuckle. I thought she was mad. It's true, unfortunately. After 8,000 years the White Walkers have returned and we're going to need your help if we have any chance to stop them. We need to handle one problem at a time. The wildling army is preparing for another assault. With the men of my guard we should be able to keep them from crossing the wall, but it will take the rest of the men I brought to the wall to crush this wildling host. I have nearly 1,500 men, all horsed. They should be here in a day or two at the most. I need to talk to you about that. I believe we can reach a truce with Mance Rayder. A truce? Robb replied skeptically. What kind of truce could we have with wildlings? You say wildlings like they're not just people. The free folk are only seeking safety behind the wall. I've seen what our true enemy is and it's not them. We can't let the others add them to their army. The Night's Watch is not strong enough to hold them back alone. We can form an alliance with the free folk and they could aid us in defending the wall. John replied. Aid us in defending the wall? Robb said incredulously. Do you hear yourself, Snow? Has this wilding whore made you forget your vows? Robb yelled at his brother, forgetting for a second the hypocrisy in it. Both brothers stood up in anger. John was about to yell at his brother, but a deep bark of laughter from behind Robb interrupted him. You're one to talk, Your Grace. Sandor Clegane said in between laughs. The two other men that accompanied Robb looked at Clegane in shock. John looked at his brother in confusion. Robb's face did not change in the slightest even while the irony sunk in. He only glared at John for several seconds before finally turning. A meeting will be formed in the morning. We'll discuss it then, he said as he exited the room with his men. So that's one of your southern kings? Ygritte said weakly. John instantly turned to Ygritte. You're awake? He yelled in a mix of shock and relief. I thought you southerners were supposed to kneel to your kings. She snickered as if she hadn't barely escaped death. John stood in silence as he processed Ygritte's recovery. Courtesies are not always kept up with in private and less so with family. When I left Winterfell we were only boys. The Master-at-Arms would not even allow him to carry real steel. Now he is a king commanding armies. John let out the faintest of laughs at the thought. Your brother had been kissed by fire, like me, she said, forming a weak smile that showed her crooked teeth. He gets it from his mother. The Tullys are known for their red hair. It's most prominent in my half-sister Sansa. John began to smile. The younger sister was the only one that received our father's trays. She once cried to her mother because she thought she was a bastard like me. He's pretty, your brother. Ygritte japed. All the girls at Winterfell thought the same, John replied, refusing to give in to her teasing. Is Lord Snow jealous? She questioned with a smirk. As a boy my darkest secrets were that I wished I was him. That I would be my father's heir, receive the Stark family sword, and be the Lord of Winterfell someday. Now my brother is king, I've never seen him so miserable. I can't help but wonder if I was the lucky one. John said sadly. You and your brother take things too seriously. Ygritte added. You should rest, Ygritte, John said as he made to leave but stopped when he reached the door. I'm sorry for lying, I never wanted to hurt you, he said, unable to look at her. Was it always a lie? She questioned, a faint amount of hope in her voice. Rangers have reported that they saw me with you beyond the wall. The senior members of the watch will not be happy that I had the maester tend to your wounds. Rob will not allow any harm to come to a prisoner under his watch, but I advise you not to try and escape. The men of the Night's Watch will look for any justification to kill a wilderling. John said, ignoring the question. Rob stepped outside and found that order seemed to have been restored. All the fires had been put out and the wounded tended to. The dead wildlings had been stacked in a pile while the fallen brothers had been set in a row neatly. Both would have the same fate, however. Rob could see men building a pyre to burn all the dead. Your Grace, I told Sir Alisa Thorne you wished to have a meeting in the morning. He agreed. Should I prepare your tent so that you can rest? Lucas Blackwood asked. No. Until more reinforcements arrive we need to be ready for another attack. Rob said. He could tell that he had been hoping for a different answer but said nothing. Rob knew his men were tired. He had nearly killed all the horses on the march up to Castle Black and he had put his men to work as soon as the battle had been won. But he was not going to be taken by surprise by the enemy on the other side of the wall. And for all Rob knew, there could be other wilderling parties south of the wall getting ready to attack. Chapter 16, 1 vs 100. John walked into the room in which Tormund had been kept in. His arms and legs had been shackled to the wall and his arrow wound had been patched. Your old blind man patched me up. Why? Tormund asked John. He's sworn to heal all wounded men, friend or foe. John replied. You want me alive so you can torture me. No one is going to torture you. So how do I die? Hanging, burning, dropped off from the top of the wall. I don't know what's going to happen to the prisoners. Who decides? My brother. The king in the north. Is he your king now? Tormund asked in a condescending tone. I don't have a king. John replied, annoyed. A smile formed on Tormund's face. You spent too much time with us. You can never go back to being a kneeler. John ignored him. We're going to burn the bodies of your dead. Do you want to say any words over them? Words? He asked, confused. What kind of words? Funeral words. I don't know how the free folk do it. Do what? Say farewell. The dead can't hear. John looked at Tormund in silence for several seconds. Finally he gave him a nod in understanding. John turned to leave but stopped himself. He kept his hand on the door for a moment as he struggled with what he was about to ask. He turned back to look at Tormund. I've told my brother of what is out there. He is skeptical of the idea of letting the free folk pass the wall, but I think he can be convinced if Mans makes some concessions. Concessions? Tormund said with a laugh. Have you forgotten that there are 100,000 free folk on the other side of this wall? Your king in the north brought what, 50 men? If anyone will be making concessions it will be your king. You don't get it. John yelled. It's already over. He doesn't need to destroy Mans's army, he just needs to stop him from getting past the wall. Why do you think Mans sent us over the wall in the first place? He needed us to open the gate from the south. It was a good plan and it almost worked. But it failed. More men are coming to reinforce my brother. Soon Castle Black will have more men than it ever has. Mans might try and send more climbers over the wall but it won't matter. Castle Black will not fall. If Mans truly wants the free folk on this side of the wall then he will have to meet my brother's demands. We do not kneel. Not to your brother or any southern king. Tormund said, effectively ending the conversation. John left the room with a feeling of failure. He arrived in the courtyard to see his fallen brothers being put to rest. And now their watch has ended. Alisa Thorne said before lighting the pyre. John saw his brother amongst the men watching the ceremony. He walked over to him as the crowd began to disperse. I wished to talk to you. Rob said to his brother. About what? John asked. I made a judgment last night without hearing your side of the story. I'm sure there is a reason for your sympathy towards the wildlings. I will hear your story then make my decision. So John told his brother about the events that had happened once he went north of the wall. He told him about capturing Ygritte and being unable to kill her, about killing Thorin half-hand on his own orders, and about meeting Mance Rayder, and about laying with Ygritte. Rob listened silently while his brother spoke. When he had finished he said nothing as he thought on what he had heard. I'm forced to believe the stories you have told me about the dead rising. That being the case, I agree that it would be wise not to let the others add them to their ranks. But I will not risk having to fight another war in the north right after I have finished expelling the Ironborn from my shores. If this king beyond the wall surrenders his crown, bends the knee, agrees to follow my laws, and gives me hostages, I will let the free folk into the north. Rob said the words as if they were of another language. Rob, they will never accept that deal. They call us kneelers as an insult. John replied. Then they will die for their pride. Rob said with a trace amount of regret. Now we have a meeting. Rob said as he signaled for his brother to follow him. Rob and John entered the dining hall where all the men, who were not currently on duty, had gathered. Sir Alisa sat at the head table with the other senior members of the watch but had left the seat of the Lord Commander vacant for Rob to take. John watched as his brother walked to the table and took a seat. Sir Alisa, have you taken count of your losses? We have, Your Grace. We lost 15 brothers last night. Our losses would have been much greater had it not been for your aid, he said politely. John took some measure of joy in watching the man kiss his brother's boots. It had only been 6 months ago that he had been calling his father a traitor. John was quite sure if he had told Rob about it he would be speaking to the man in a much harsher tone. And what do you all number now? Rob asked. 40 men. 40. Rob said in surprise. I had hoped you still numbered in the hundreds. Rob's face returned to his icy mask. Moore's Umber sent another 50 men to support the watch that arrived this morning. We have 140 men to hold off the wildlings' horde until the rest of my army arrives. I suggest we double the men on top of the wall. That seems a wise decision, Your Grace. With your reinforcements we should have no trouble keeping the savages from crossing the wall. I have not the time nor the men to leave here to defend the wall. I have been told that the men who returned from north of the wall claim that they saw White Walkers. That is true, but I don't understand how that changes the situation. Sir Alisa questioned. We should need you now more than ever. My brother has informed me that he was ordered by one of your rangers to infiltrate the Wilderling camp. Rob took note of the anger that crossed Sir Alisa's face at his words. He believes that their king can be reasoned with. I'm willing to hear him out. Shouts of protest erupted from the senior members of the watch. This is not a discussion. I'm informing you all of my intent out of courtesy. If this king beyond the wall meets my demands, I will let him into my kingdom. I see no reason to allow the others to add them to their army if it can be avoided. The wildlings may be useful in defending the wall from the true enemy. With that Rob stood up and left. John was quite surprised with how much confidence Rob spoke of the plan. Yesterday Rob had acted as if he was crazy when he suggested the idea to him. The rest of the day had been anything but boring. As John had guessed, Mance had sent climbers up the wall to take the fort that guarded the gate. Unfortunately for them, Rob had already doubled the guard on the top of the wall and they were quickly dealt with. On the second day Rob had felt confident enough in the defences of Castle Black to send an envoy to Mance. John had volunteered for the job even though Rob was against it. He was worried that Mance would sooner have him hanged for lying to him than treat with him. John had convinced his brother that Mance was not that kind of man, but was not completely certain himself if he believed it. What he was certain of was that Mance would be more likely to hear him out than some messenger from the king in the north. So John travelled under the wall on a horse carrying a white flag. As he entered the Wilderling camp he saw hundreds of eyes staring at him with contempt, but no one made any move to attack him. He was escorted to Mance's tent and checked for weapons. I had not expected to see you in a black cloak again, Mance said. I've been sent here to negotiate with you, John replied. It seems my trusting nature got the best of me. That's not the first time that has happened. I wanted to believe your loyalty was real when you pledged yourself to me. Truly I did. The half-hand ordered me to kill him and gain your loyalty. I was supposed to bring back whatever information I could to Castle Black. I was loyal to him and to my Night's Watch vows. All your vows? Mance replied with a knowing look. She wasn't enough to turn you. Were you enough to turn her? John found it hard to reply. The grid was the last thing he wanted to think about at the moment. That's not important right now. The king in the north has sent me with peace terms. I have told my brother about the true enemy and he has agreed to let your people pass the wall provided you agree to his terms. Oh, the king in the north. There hasn't been a king in the north in nearly 300 years. What terms does your king give me? Mance asked in a mocking tone. First, you must renounce your title as king beyond the wall. Second, you must convince the free folk to bend the knee, accept the king's laws, and promise to keep the king's peace. Third, the chiefs of the various clans must each provide sons or daughters to be held as wards by the various northern houses. John said, glad to be done with the demands. Has your king forgotten that I have 100,000 free folk with me? Your king brought what, 50 men with him, from what the wargs have told me. When I learned how low your defenses were, I sent 400 men over the wall. That was 2 days ago. Now they are moving into position for another attack. Do you really think Castle Black can handle another assault? John heard Mance's claim and realized that he did not fully understand the situation. You've deluded yourself. Your initial attack failed and your second attempt to take the top of the wall failed. Now both the strength at the top and in the castle have been doubled. 300 men now guard the wall. Nothing less than 1,000 men could take the castle from the south. All while 2,000 men are marching to Castle Black to reinforce my brother. When that happen, it will be impossible to pass. And even if you did, then what? The king's army has nearly finished expelling the Ironborn from his shores. It's 10,000 strong. Not women or children, but 10,000 battle-hardened soldiers. They would cut your army to pieces. I beg you to consider what my brother offers you. John said, breaking the formality and titles. Mance looked to be noticeably surprised by John's reaction. It seems the free folk had more of an influence on you than I thought. Tell me, is it hard to keep us north of the wall after having been one of us? After having fallen in love with one of us? John refused to answer the question. I thank you for speaking to your brother on our behalf, but I'm afraid it is going to be war. Free folk isn't just a name, it's a way of life. We do not kneel, Jon Snow, and we're not going to start now. John was about to reply but was interrupted. Mance, men are coming out of the tunnel. A spearwife yelled. Have they attacked yet? Mance said as he stood up. No, they are just standing there in a line. She replied. Mance began to calm himself. How many men? 150, maybe 200. All on horses. Ha. Looks like your brother came to the same decision as me. Though it looks like your claim about 2,000 was a bit exaggerated. If he thinks 200 men are going to stop us, then he's a fool. I suggest you return to him and talk some sense into him. Mance said. John rode back to his brother's army to see what had possessed him to form up in ranks on the north side of the wall. What in the hell are you doing? You sent me to treat with him. Why are you preparing to attack? I did. What of his answer? Robb asked in an icy tone. He refused. John said with slight embarrassment. But it doesn't justify mobilizing before you have his answer. You speak to me about justification. We found a raiding party of nearly 300 men coming to attack Castle Black. Luckily for us, he rode right into Sadavo's party. They were crushed 5 miles east of the castle. That doesn't explain why you left the strong defenses of the wall. John asked skeptically. For a man who had claimed to never have lost a battle, it seemed like a strategically poor decision. My plan required a southern flank. I didn't want to risk people not able to get the full force out. Now if that is all, you should return to the wall. Have you gone mad? You can't hope to fight 100,000 wildlings with 200 men. 100,000 wildling mayhaps, but how many are women and children or men too old to hold a spear? I wager half are of fighting age, and out of that half might be real warriors, and none of them have the discipline required of a real soldier. So you're willing to fight 25,000 wildlings with your 200 real soldiers? John asked doubtfully. Robb placed his hand on his brother's and gave him the first smile he had seen since first arriving. Trust me. I have been nervous before many battles, but this is not one of them. Before John could argue further, he began to hear war horns. It seems Small John was a little anxious to get started. "I suggest you get to the wall," Rob said before heading to the front of the small party. He raised his sword and a bright light showed across the battlefield. His brother ordered the charge and the small cavalry marched forward. John had ignored his brother and stayed where his brother had left him. He watched on in awe as a second host, much smaller than Mance's, poured in from the east. They unleashed thousands of arrows before they entered into the forest. It was like a wave crushing a sand castle. Several brave men who had been on the outskirts of the wildling host attempted to stop the approaching army as they entered the forest, but all of them were knocked over with minimal effort. Had they attacked as a group they might have provided some small amount of resistance, but as it were they attacked in small bands that were cut to pieces by battle axes, swords, and charging horses. After the first countercharge was crushed the wildlings began to turn in retreat. The northern host cut through the wildling host with nearly no resistance. He saw men break in all directions as soon as the cavalry made contact with the center of the army. In fact, in the front of the host he saw men begin to retreat even before Rob's forces made it to them. The arrows from above and the panic from the middle of the host must have scared the people at the front of the army. That, coupled with Rob's sword, which emitted a light almost as if it was on fire, must have startled the weaker souls amongst the wildling ranks. The mammoths, which the wildlings probably thought their greatest weapon, now crushed dozens of them trying to get away from the arrows before they themselves finally fell. It started as several bands of men retreating or falling back, but after the first 200 men ran it was as if a dam had broken. The entire army began to rout from nearly all sides. Many trampled over their own to get free from the arrows and the cavalry that seemed like a flood. John felt like the battle had lasted less than 10 minutes when he began to ride up to what remained of the wildling army. He saw hundreds of them on the ground dead and just as many being rounded up in groups to be put in chains. John found his brother leaning heavily on an older man that John did not recognize. "Get him to a maester now," Rob yelled to a tall man with the giant of House Umber on his chest. The man placed Sander Clegane's broken body on his horse and rode off. "What happened?" John asked. "I was careless," Rob said, angry with himself. "I underestimated the strength of the giants. When we encircled them they lashed out. Had it not been for Clegane I would be the one being carried off on the back of a horse." Rob turned his head to a man who had the eagle of House Mallister on his chest. "Did you find this king beyond the wall?" "Yes, your grace," the man replied. "Was he taken alive?" Rob asked. "He was, your grace. He ordered his men to stand down once he saw that the fight was lost." "Bring him to me," Rob commanded. "Your grace, should we not have the maester tend to your wounds first?" The man Rob was leaning on asked. "Just do as I said," Rob yelled through his pain. "As you command." The man bowed before turning to retrieve the prisoners. Rob realized that he had lost his temper and tried to calm himself. "I apologize, Sir Davos. I thank you for your concern. It seems I do not yet have the temperament of a true king." "Think nothing of it, your grace. Even the greatest of men lash out while in pain," Sir Davos replied. "Are you sure that you don't need to see a maester?" John asked his brother in a worried tone. "I'll manage. I want this issue taken care of before I rest." "You never expected him to accept your terms?" John asked. "No," Rob responded without shame. "Being a king has taught me to trust little, and I have learned that negotiations never go well from a position of weakness. Now that his army is scattered he may find my terms more gracious. You should have told me that your army was in place. I learned of it only after you left to treat with him." "What difference would it have made if I told you when you returned?" Rob asked with genuine curiosity. "I would have been less worried," John said as a smile formed on his face. Rob mirrored his brother and began to smile as well. "I told you not to worry. I have made a mess of many things during this war, but battles have not been one of them." Rob's smile faded as he saw Mance Rayder being escorted to him. Having freely surrendered he had not been chained, only disarmed. He led a small group of fellow wildlings who he had ordered to surrender with him. Rob struggled to stand on his own but eventually managed. Rob's personal guard all raised their weapons as Mance approached. "My brother tells me you refused my terms. What say you now?" Rob asked in a powerful voice. Will you surrender your title and bend the knee? You have defeated us, I admit. You have my respect, but we are free folk and we do not kneel. Mance said proudly. Rob seemed unsurprised by the man's response. My brother tells me that the others have returned and they bring the dead with them. In all honesty, I thought him crazy at first, but I know my brother and I know he's not a liar. It is because of this fact and only this fact that I'm considering letting you into my kingdom. I see no reason to allow them to add your people to their ranks when you could help defend the wall, but if you refuse my terms I have no choice but to leave your people here. Mance stared at Rob unflinching. We do not seek to plunder. We just want to hide behind the safety of your wall. But I will not trade my people's freedom for it. Am I correct in assuming that you hold your title as king for your people? Rob asked. Everything I do is for my people. Mance replied proudly. As do I. And I'm sure you believe it when you say you don't wish to plunder, but for the last 8,000 years all that my people have seen when the free folk cross the wall is them raiding their villages and stealing their daughters. Do you think it makes much of a difference to my people if they are killed by your people or by the undead? Rob asked rhetorically. I will not trade the safety of my people for the hope of a weaker enemy. Among my titles I count King of the Trident amongst them, and that means I must take my army back south. I do not have the men to leave at the wall to defend it or to make sure your people behave themselves. So if you refuse this offer I will send your men back to your side of the wall shorter-hand and take my chances that I can defeat my enemies in the south before the others try to make it across the wall. You were raised to believe kneeling before another person because of who their great-grandfather was is a normal part of life. I don't fault you for it, but we were raised to believe that every person had a right to have their own say and follow who they thought was fit to lead based on character, not on blood. You would ask us to give that up and be slaves? John noticed a flash of anger in Rob's eyes at Mance's final word. He let out an empty laugh. You talk of slaves, but I don't think you truly understand the word. My wife comes from the largest slave city in the world. When her father learned of our marriage he bought 4,000 slave soldiers and gave them to me as you might give a son a knife. These slaves were so loyal that if asked them to cut off their own arm they would do so without hesitation. The thought of using slaves to fight my war sickened my wife and I, so I chose to give them all their freedom. I told them all they could leave and no one would stop them. All 4,000 of them raised their spears and proclaimed me their king. That's a nice story, but what does it have to do with us? Mance questioned. Freedom doesn't always mean not serving. Freedom is about having a choice. Those former slaves chose to fight in my army as free men. I am offering you a similar choice. You can allow your people to die standing up, or you can bend the knee and live as citizens of my kingdom. Aid the Night's Watch in fighting the White Walkers and I will give your people land to live on. Choose your own leaders, honor your own customs, it makes no difference to me as long as my laws are followed and you accept me as king. Mance said nothing as he looked at Rob. John could tell he was struggling with the decision. Before he could give a reply, a boy no older than 12 ran from the group behind Mance and pulled out a small knife. He made to stab Rob in the stomach. Before any of Rob's men could react, the king in the north had grabbed the boy's hand and forced him to the ground. Rob gave out a shout of pain as the movement seemed to have put strain on his bruised body. Soon every man had their sword drawn on the boy. What should we do with him, Your Grace? One of the men asked. Rob took the knife out of the boy's hand and helped him to his feet. He sent him back over to Mance. You have until I head south in 3 days to make a decision. After that the decision will belong to the Night's Watch and I doubt they will be as merciful as me. Rob then turned to walk back to Castle Black. Your Grace, what do you want us to do with the prisoners? A soldier asked, confused. The ones that have been put in chains will return to the castle with us. The rest are free to go. He replied. What? You're just going to let him go free? Another soldier asked. Isn't that what I just said? Rob replied, annoyed, before ordering his squire to retrieve his horse. With that the northern army gathered its prisoners and returned to the castle. Chapter 17, Exodus. Rob yelled through grit teeth. Are you okay? John asked as he opened the door. His Grace's shoulder was dislocated. It needed to be set. Maester Eamon said. Your shoulder will feel sore for a fortnight, but it should be fine. I suggest an ice bath for the rest of your bruising. Understood, Rob replied. The maester turned to leave Rob alone with his brother. How is Clegane? Rob asked before Maester Eamon had gotten to the door. His body was damaged far worse than yours. One of his vertebrae was broken. It is possible he may yet still walk someday, but as far as fighting, his days are over. Thank you, Rob said as Maester Eamon left. As he exited the room, Sir Davos entered. Your Grace, Castle Black received a letter from Winterfell. I thought you might want to read it. Rob struggled to sit down in his chair. Could you read it if you please? Sir Davos lowered his head in embarrassment. I apologize, but I do not possess the skill, Your Grace. Jon, if you could. Rob said, signaling to his brother to read the letter. Sir Davos handed off the letter to Jon. It's from Sir Roderick. He writes that he received word from Theon. Theon lost the King's Moot to his uncle Euron. Euron? Rob said in confusion. Last I was told Euron Greyjoy had been banished from the Iron Islands. It would seem he returned for the King's Moot. The timing seems suspicious if you ask me. Jon replied. Rob let out a deep sigh in frustration. He clenched his hands into fists in anger. I had hoped that Theon could bring the Ironborn to my cause. It seems I was too optimistic. The Ironborn are too much of a threat to leave on their own when I march back south. It seems I must now lay siege to the islands and place Theon in control by force. It seems Theon recommends leaving his uncle to his own devices. Jon interrupted. For what purpose? Rob asked angrily. He says his uncle plans on raiding in the Reach. Theon writes that Euron already sent his brother with half the Iron Fleet to attack the Shield Islands. Rob gave a small chuckle. I don't know what he hopes to accomplish besides angering the Tyrells. But Theon is right. I will not make the same mistake Balon did. If the Ironborn are going to fight my enemies, I see no advantage in disrupting them. What do you think, Sir Davos? I agree. With the Tyrells distracted, you might have a good chance at overpowering the Lannisters. I might leave a small force on the western coast in case they return, however. Agreed. I thank you for your advice. If you could give me and my brother the room. Oh, and if you see my squire, send him here. Of course. Sir Davos said before bowing, then exiting the room. Rob, are you sure it wise to trust Theon? As much as you like him, he's still Ironborn. Jon asked. Theon has proved his loyalty to House Stark. Even against his own father he chose us. Jon was hesitant to believe that, but said nothing in reply. Jon, when do the men of the Night's Watch pick the new Lord Commander? In the next day or two. We're just waiting on the representatives from the Shadow Tower. Good. I have several things I need from the next Lord Commander. Does it really matter? Whoever is chosen will not be happy with you allowing the wildlings to pass the wall, but as long as your army is here they can't really do much about it. I'm not that concerned with wildlings at this point. I need a new Lord Commander to release you from your vows. Release me from my vows? Jon said in confusion. People don't get released from their vows. You serve till death without exception. I wager if I offer to leave a dozen men here, the next Lord Commander will see no reason why you can't be released from your vows. It might set a precedent, but that is of little concern to me. Joffrey released Sir Barristan from his vows. Foolish as that was, the Kingsguard still stands. It's not about being allowed. I swore a sacred vow in front of the Heart Tree. Does that mean nothing to you? Of course it does, but this is bigger than that. Jon, I need you. Rob, I'm one man. What possible difference could I make? You're going to be my heir. You're what? Jon asked, not truly understanding what he had just heard. My heir. I'm going to have you legitimized and you're going to be my heir. Rob. Bran is still alive. Yes, but he's off somewhere north of the wall. He can't be a king if nobody knows where he is. What about Arya or your child? Arya is barely 12 and is betrothed to a Free. The lords aren't going to follow a child. I was our father's eldest son and Grey Wind still had to bite off one of their fingers before they respected me. No, this kingdom needs an adult Stark if it has any hope of surviving. Every time I go into battle I have to face the possibility that some stray arrow could end my life and throw the North into chaos. Even if Talisa gives me a son, he will need a regent until he comes of age, and right now you're the only one that can fill that position. My wife is a foreigner, my mother is considered a traitor, and if I make any of my lords a regent I risk angering half of them. Jon was quiet for a moment. His brother was telling him what he had always wanted to hear. He was going to be a true Stark. He would be proclaimed the heir to Winterfell in front of all the lords in the north. It even seemed like the right thing to do. His family had dire need of him. He could help his brother lead the north to independence. And if he accomplished that, the wall would receive all the aid it would ever need. His brother was right that no Lord Commander would refuse a dozen men for releasing Jon from his vows. It seemed like the right choice from almost every situation, except one. The only one that truly mattered. The vow. No matter how much he wanted to, the honor his father had instilled in him would not allow it. I'm sorry, Robb, but I took a vow to hold no titles or lands. Regardless of what the next Lord Commander does, I will not be your heir. Robb gritted his teeth in anger. In all things he had considered going wrong, his brother refusing to leave with him had not been one of them. What about laying with that wildling woman? You didn't seem to have any trouble breaking your vows then. Robb replied angrily. I did what I was ordered to do. Jon replied calmly. So you would just turn your back on your family? Robb said harshly. The Night's Watch is my family now. Jon replied. You requested me, Your Grace. Elmar said as he entered into the room. Robb continued to stare daggers at his brother. Finally Robb turned to his squire. I need an ice bath drawn. Of course, Your Grace. Elmar replied with some confusion. If there's nothing else, Your Grace. Jon said. Go. Robb replied angrily. Robb had been thinking on his argument with his brother as he soaked in the ice water. The more he thought on it, the more he hated his brother. He cursed him in his head for refusing to leave the watch. Robb got angrier and angrier until finally he understood why it had made him so mad. It was not because of how much he needed his brother in this war. It was the fact that Jon had proven not to be as weak-willed as Robb. That out of the two of them Robb had been the one unable to keep his words. They say that bastards are naturally wanton and traitorous. What a lie that is. It would seem Lord Eddard's bastard was the more honorable of his eldest sons. Mayhaps he should have been born the heir and I the bastard. Robb's contemplation was interrupted as Lucas Blackwood entered the room. Your Grace, I apologize for interrupting, but I thought you would want to know we had a wildling come forward to accept your terms. Mance? Robb asked through chattering teeth. No, Your Grace. He didn't say his name. He was quite young. No older than 14. All right. Send him to THTH the Solar. As you command, Your Grace. Lucas bowed then left. It took Robb longer to get dressed than he would have liked, but eventually he managed. He left the Maester's quarters and walked outside. As he climbed the stairs of the King's Tower he soon regretted making it his chambers. The ice bath had numbed some of the pain, but his legs still hurt immensely. When he finally reached the top, two of his guards stood posted at the door and opened it for him. Inside was the wildling, Lucas, and small Janumber. Robb walked over to the desk and sat down. Robb noticed that the wildling looked rather different than some of the other wildlings. While he wore furs, Robb also noticed bronze armor interwoven into them. He had a spike bronze helm on his head and a bronze battle axe that, unlike the other wildlings, had been made south of the wall instead of being looted from a dead brother of the Night's Watch. You've come to accept my terms? Yes. He replied. Do you speak for the king beyond the wall? No. He's to be referred to as, Your Grace. Small Janumber said to the boy. To Robb's surprise, the boy seemed quite sorry for the breach in etiquette. I apologize, Your Grace. He said, testing out the word. So if you do not speak for Mance, who do you speak for? Robb asked. I speak for the Thans. My father died in the attack on Castle Black. I Sigornum, now the Magna of the Thans. Robb remembered the Thans being pointed out to him after the battle. Forgive me, but you seem quite different than the other Thans. You lack the markings of the others. Robb said, struggling to find a polite way to say it. We do not earn our marking until we come of age. But I assure you that I lead the Thans. So why have you come to accept my terms against the wishes of your king? Robb asked. Mance convinced my father that joining him was the only way to save us. Now that his army has been defeated, I believe accepting your terms are the only way to save my people. Well, I have no problem with accepting your people as long as you understand the terms. I do. We will accept your laws and take you as our king. I will also need 10 sons or daughters as hostages. Agreed. Robb was quiet as he thought on how to ask his last question. I'm told by other members of the Night's Watch that Thans have been known to eat other men. Is that true? We do. Saigon replied without flinching. That is forbidden in my kingdom. You understand, that will no longer be accepted. If you enter my kingdom, I expect my subjects to be left alone. There will be no raiding or stealing of women. No killing and no eating of others. Now can you stand here and promise these laws will be obeyed? We are not like other free folk. He said, partially offended at the question. If a Magna gives a command, the command is followed. Then we have an agreement. Robb stood from his chair and walked over to Saigon. Kneel. Saigon did so without complaint. I, Robb Stark, king in the north and of the Trident, lord of Winterfell, accept the Thans into my kingdom as citizens of the realm. I swear to uphold justice and give you shelter from your enemies. Do you, Saigon, Magna of the Thans, swear to accept me as your king and to honor my laws? Saigon seemed confused with the small ceremony but replied nonetheless. I swear. Rise. Robb commanded. He offered his hand to Saigon and he grabbed it by the forearm. They shook. Welcome. Return to your people and bring them here. Saigon thanked the king, then left. You're letting the wildlings into the north? The smalljan asked angrily as soon as Saigon left the room. Robb knew that this would not go over well with his lords. Especially with the Umbers. They lived closest to the wall and were most likely to face raids from wildlings. However, Robb would not show weakness in front of opposition. I know you are not happy about this. But we have greater enemies to be concerned about. The others have returned and I would rather not allow them to add the wildlings to their forces. Precautions will be made in order to protect Umber lands from them. A look of anger remained on the smalljan's face. As you say, Your Grace. It had been nearly an hour later when the men at the top of the wall reported a large group of wildlings walking toward the gate. Robb ordered them to open the gate and 400 Thans and 1 giant entered under the gate. All of the men in Robb army and the men of the Night's Watch were put on edge as the wildlings entered into Castle Black. All the archers had their arrows trained on the giant. You did not tell me you would be bringing a giant with you. Robb told Saigon. I apologize, Your Grace. His name is Van Weeg Van Da Oven. We call him Van Van. After your people killed their last king, he was made leader of the giants. He has also agreed to accept your terms. The giants only speak the old tongue, so I have agreed to speak for him. I will require hostages from the giants as well. Saigon looked troubled by that statement. Giants do not have children like regular men. It is rare for more than 1 giant to be born in a decade. How many giants are left? Robb asked coldly. 175. Robb hid his surprise at the statement. Can I really risk letting that many giants past the wall? We were only able to bring them down during battle because of our archers. Only the gods know what would happen if they attacked a village. How many children do they have among them? There are 3 giants among them that we would consider children. They will be required to give them all up as hostages. Saigon turned his head and spoke to Van Van in the old tongue. Van Van gave a loud growl in frustration after he spoke. He agrees to your terms but says that the tunnel is not large enough for the mammoths to travel though. Fine, send them to Eastwatch. Robb replied in an icy tone. Van Van spoke some words that Robb assumed were his agreement to the terms, then all the Thans and Van Van knelt before Robb. Robb gave his oath again and allowed them leave to set up camp outside the walls of Castle Black. The next day Robb was awoken to do the whole thing over again. Van Van returned with the other giants. Robb watched as they walked under the gate in pairs of 2. He knew that at least half of the giants must have been female, but for the life of him he could not tell which ones. The men were even more on edge as the giants lined up in the courtyard. Every man who took part in the battle has been claiming the title Giant Slayer, even though your Grace and Clegane are the only ones who actually slayed one. Patriarch Malister said. Speak for yourself, Malister. I took one down as well when we arrived at Castle Black. The Thans tell me his name was Mag the Mighty. Lucas bragged. As I heard it, you and 5 other men stabbed it while it tried to open the gate. Smoljan laughed. It matters not. Most of the men who killed a giant probably don't even know it. It was the hundreds of arrows that filled the sky that killed most of the giants. Rob said to end the petty arguments. Van approached the king after the last giant had arrived. He brought forward 3 smaller giants which Rob assumed were the children, even though the smallest of them was a foot taller than the Smoljan. The giants all bent the knee and Rob said his oath even though he doubted any of them understood it. The giants then left and formed a camp near the Thans. Rob waited in the solar of the king's tower as the brothers of the Night's Watch had their election. The delegation from Eastwatch had arrived that morning and Rob wanted a new Lord Commander picked as soon as possible. He had resigned himself to the fact that his brother would not forswear his vows, but other things needed to be discussed. For one, Rob wanted to settle the wildlings on the new gift which would require the Watch to relinquish control of it. As he thought on it, Sir Davos entered the solar. I apologize for the interruption, Your Grace. Sir Davos said humbly. Think nothing of it. What can I help you with? I was speaking to some of your personal guard. Many of them were hoping after their last battle they had proved themselves worthy of a knighthood. I was thinking the same for Gendry. Even without any proper training with a sword he fought bravely. Even saved my life when we came on that wildling party south of the wall. Truth be told, Sir Davos, knighthoods have been the furthest thing from my mind. But Gendry is your ward. If you think he has earned it, you have every right to knight him. As far as my personal guard, I plan to have my uncle Brynden do the honor. He is greatly respected in the Riverlands. With respect, Your Grace, I know that it would mean a great deal more to your men if they were knighted by their king. My eldest son was knighted by Stannis and he held it as his highest honor. You might be right, but I'm not a knight. If I might be so bold, Your Grace, you have more than earned the honor. There are several highborn knights among my small group that would be honored to knight you. Rob thought on Sir Davos' words. My father never held knighthood in much regard. He had little need for titles or show, but my father wasn't a king and I have come to learn the importance of appearances. Half my subjects are Southerners and I cannot afford to forget that. I am my mother's son as much as my father's and will not forget her customs. If you would do the honors. Rob said as he walked over to Davos. Me, Your Grace? He asked in shock. It was your idea. I see no reason why not. But I'm lowborn. All the better reason for you to do it. Your knighthood was earned for your courage and not because of your family name. I see now why Stannis trusted your counsel. If you would. Rob said as he knelt in front of the man. Davos took his sword out and placed it on Rob's shoulder. He recited the words that Stannis had said to him nearly 20 years ago. Rob responded in kind and rose an anointed knight. As he rose he noticed a rather fat man standing in the doorway. Sorry, Your Grace, I didn't realize you were in the middle of a ceremony. The man said shyly. It's fine. What do you need? Rob replied. John wanted me to tell you that the vote fell through. No one was able to gain a 2/3 RDS majority. Thank you. Rob replied. He however realized that the man had not left. Is there something else? Right now Sir Denys Mallister, Alisa Thorne, and Cotter Pike have the most votes. None of them however will support the other so they can gain the necessary majority. And even if one of them did, I fear that none of them truly understand what the real enemy is. They are all brave men, of that there can be no doubt, but I fear all of them think of the wildlings as the biggest threat. They all complain about your decision to let the wildlings through the gate during the meetings. If they could, they would throw them all back across the wall. Why are you telling me this? What do you wish me to do? With your army here you have great influence. If you recommended that John should be the next Lord Commander, the men will listen. Rob looked at the man for a second as he processed what he just asked him. I can't do that. He finally said. While I have no doubt that my brother would make an excellent Lord Commander, if I were to interfere with the process and get him elected, those against him might claim his position was taken unjustly as soon as I march my army south. Whoever is to take the position must do it with the full consent of the Watch. The man dropped his head in defeat. I'm not very skilled in politics, but I have learned several things fighting this war. If these three men fear the other getting elected, you may be able to use that. They may find an ally in John for no other reason but keeping the others from the position. Thank you, Your Grace, he said before bowing, then leaving. Rob awoke early the next day and walked into the courtyard. He saw Grey Wind and Ghost playing with each other. It seems like the two of y'all are getting along better than John and I, he thought sadly. He had tried to spar with the Great John, but his injuries had quickly gotten the better of him and he was forced to yield. Again another clan of wildlings had come to accept Rob's terms. Rob was forced to go through the process again. This time it was nearly 300 wildlings that passed through the wall. The wilderling leader wore a white weirwood mask. The wilderling chief approached him. Rob was shocked to find out that the wilderling chief was in fact a woman, a surprising beautiful woman if he was being completely honest. She and her people bowed like the other, however she went as far as to kiss Rob's gloved hand. She swore to be his man or woman, whichever he preferred, and gave 10 hostages including her own son. Her clan took a place outside Castle Black. It was a little past noon when John arrived to tell him he had been chosen as the 998th Lord Commander. Rob could tell that John was surprised by Rob's lack of a reaction. Then I guess we have terms to discuss, he told his brother. They entered into the King's Tower and sat down in the solar. I assume you plan to have some of the wildlings man the abandoned castles. I do. Good. I feel rather confident that the Thans will do as Sigorn commands. I however cannot speak for the giants. Either way, I would like you to return the new gift to me. I plan to settle the wildlings there. Rob, the Night's Watch depends on those lands to support itself, he replied quite harshly. I understand that, but right now I need somewhere to put the wildlings. Just settle them in the north. I will not settle them any closer to Last Hearth than I have to. The Great Yon has been my greatest supporter and I'm about to reward that loyalty by filling his neighboring lands with wildlings. His son wants to strangle me, I can see it in his eyes. It was you who convinced me to let them into the north. The least you could do is help me settle them. Rob replied angrily. I'll need things in return for the watch. Like what? Money, supplies for winter, more men. I can give you 5,000 dragons and leave you 20 men. As far as food, I don't have enough to spare. I'm already making plans to import food from Essos, and if the gods are good, if I win this war I can extract some food from the south. Right now the Riverlands needs the food more than the watch. 20,000 dragons and 200 men. John countered. 10,000 dragons and 100 men. Rob countered annoyed. 15,000 dr. No, it will be 10,000 dragons and 100 men, no more. Rob interrupted angrily, forgetting for a second it was his own brother he was negotiating with. Agreed, John said, not wanting to push his luck. Rob then stood up and got a pitcher of wine. He poured a cup for him and his brother. Your mother must have been a fisherman's daughter with the way you haggle. Rob looked at his brother and realized he had overstepped. He was about to speak when his brother started laughing. Soon Rob joined him and the eldest siblings of Ned Stark laughed harder than they had in years. Your Grace, the Wilderling army has regrouped, Elmar said, nearly out of breath. Rob quickly calmed himself. How far from the wall are they? They're in the forest. Well, I guess we'll see what man's answer is, Rob said as he stood up and began to walk out of the solar. He quickly gathered 500 men and led them north of the wall. They were able to form ranks without any interruption from the wildlings. Rob marched the army forward and halted 100 yards from the forest. As soon as he stopped, a small band of wildlings advanced. Rob realized that they were led by Mance. They all stopped 10 feet from Rob's horse. Have you reconsidered my terms? Rob asked in a harsh tone. We have, Mance replied reluctantly. But we have one demand. You are in no position to make demands, Rob said coldly. All the same, we have one. Many of our people scattered after your army descended on us. Mother Mole led thousands of free folk to Hardham claiming they would find salvation there. They will starve to death soon. If you would agree to send your ships to retrieve the rest of my people, we will bend the knee. The words came out of his mouth like poison. How many free folk are with you now? Rob asked in a frustrated tone. 20,000, and nearly as many are at Hardham. Rob was silent as he contemplated the thought of letting so many wildlings into the north. Food was already scarce and winter was coming. Yet his brother was right when he had said that the wildlings were no different from us. Just people who were born on the wrong side of the wall. Out of the nearly 700 wildlings he had already let through, he had been able to see most were not warriors. Many were women and children. Old men and women that might not even last the winter. Had he not seen that sight, he might have made a different choice. As it happened, he had seen them, and as much as he tried, he had not yet closed his heart off. He was still a man with some compassion for others. Fine, but I will need 400 hostages in exchange. A smile formed on Man's face. I accept. I will send my ships to retrieve the others at Hardham. But I have my own request. A man of the Night's Watch reported seeing my brother crossing the wall. For what reason I do not know, but I want him found. Send however many people it takes, but I want my brother found. I will do all I can. Mance replied. Rob dismounted from his horse and approached the wildlings. He signaled his guards to stay where they were. 24 clan chiefs stepped forward. Rob saw both men and women among them. Some wore sealskins, others wolf pelts. One woman carried a dog's head as a totem. He saw the fur of a snow bear, and the oddest of them all was a man whose armor was made from bone and wore a giant's skull as a helm. You all understand that once you pass the wall you are no longer wildlings or free folk. You will be citizens of my kingdom, entitled to my protection. My laws will be followed. There will be no raiding, killing, or stealing of daughters from the surrounding villages. And there will be no fighting among yourselves either. You may all retain the clan and customs of your ancestors, but whatever petty grudges you have with each other ends now. Giants, Thans, Hornfoots, Ice River clan, cave people, it does not matter, you are all northerners now with one king. If you agree to these terms, bend the knee and swear to obey them. They all knelt, some with more reluctance than others, but in the end they all bent the knee. They all swore their allegiance, at least as far as Rob could tell. He heard their oaths being given in 3 different languages and in several different manners. Regardless, he commanded them all to rise when they had finished. You will send the hostages through the gate first. Then the women, the elders, and the rest of the children. The warriors will cross last. As expected, there was much disapproval at this command. How do we know that you won't shut the gate right after you have all of our women and children on your side? The man with the bone armor yelled. You don't. Rob replied with an icy tone. Just as I don't know you won't start raiding as soon as I march back south. It seems like we will just have to trust each other. With that, Rob turned to lead his army back under the wall. Chapter 18, Ruling. 99-100 Okay, here I come. Arya shouted. She ran through the Godswood to look for Shireen. She had completely circled around the Godswood and still had not seen Shireen. She looked in every bush and up trees, yet nothing. She was about to give up when she saw Shireen's fool Patchface. Do you know where Shireen is hiding? Under the sea the stag hides while the wolf hunts. I know, oh. He replied before doing a cartwheel. Well, that was helpful. Arya walked over to the pond and picked up a rock. Where could she be? She said out loud. She threw a couple rocks into the pond as she thought of all the hiding places she and Bran used to use. Maybe she cheated and went outside the Godswood. As she threw a rock at some tall grass that laid in the pond, she heard a loud ouch. Arya ran over and found Shireen neck deep in the water, hidden beneath the grass. Found you! She cried happily. You got lucky. Shireen said as she got out of the pond. You're just mad because I found you. Now let's get back to the barracks. I'm supposed to have a rematch with Devan. This is going to be the time I beat him. You said that last time. Shireen replied. Well, Devan's only won because he's better at using his shield. You come up with a different reason every time he beats you. Maybe it's just because he's a good fighter. He's been in real battles, you know. He squired for my father during the Blackwater. Sir Justin said he had to force him on the ship after my father fell. She said, becoming sad at the thought. My father liked him a lot and he didn't like anybody. Arya was caught off guard by Shirene's comment. The girl almost never spoke of her father. Daisy says you're getting a lot better. She even said your stance was better than mine. Arya said, trying to lift the girl's spirit. As hoped, Shireen perked up. Did she really? I never thought I would learn to use a sword. My mother would be furious if she knew I was being trained. My mother wasn't happy about me learning either. But since Rob's making me marry Afri, he said I could learn to fight. Even told our mother that she had to let me learn. As the giant goes down, so does the hound. Down, down, down. I know, ho, 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 Patchfizz said. Do you know what he's talking about? Arya asked. No. We don't ever really know what he's talking about. My father told me after the shipwreck he was in the sea for 3 days. That the sea turned him mad. But I think he's just cleverer than all of us. Isn't that right, Patches? Shireen said as she gave him a hug. I'll race you to the barracks. Arya screamed as she ran off. No fair, I wasn't ready. Shireen cried out as she tried to catch up with her. Arya had quickly forgotten about how frustrating it had been trying to keep up with Sansa and Jane when they would leave her behind. Now she enjoyed having a friend that she was faster than. Arya arrived at the barracks a good 5 seconds ahead of Shireen. You're supposed to wait till the other person is ready. Shireen said as she tried to regain her breath. Y'all are late. Daisy said. Sorry. We were playing in the Godswood. Shireen replied. Well, get suited up. I'm going to start y'all off with a spa. Daisy replied. The two princesses got suited up in padding, Shireen with far more than Arya, and went at it. Arya had made sure to go easy on Shireen since she had only been practicing for a fortnight. Still, it was quite impressive seeing Shireen using a sword when a month ago she had been a shy girl who spent most of her day reading. Arya had recently realized how much she had wanted a sister more like her. Sansa had always been the perfect little lady. Courtesies always came naturally to Sansa. She wanted to live in a song with knights and princes. While Shireen knew how to play the role as a princess, she loved getting dirty, playing outside, and actually having fun. This train of thought came to an end as Arya heard a loud voice. Arya Stark, what in the name of the seven are you doing? Catelyn Stark yelled. Daisy Mormont went to attention at the presence of the Lady of Winterfell, and Shireen lowered her head as a small sign of respect. Arya on the other hand turned to face her mother. I'm training. She replied as if it was obvious. This seemed to anger Lady Catelyn even more. Look at you. You're a mess. And you've gotten Princess Shireen dirty as well. Please don't get mad at her. I asked to train with her. Shireen said humbly. Arya Stark, get inside and get washed up. Rob said I could train. Arya replied stubbornly. Didn't he, Daisy? She said, looking at her instructor for support. Daisy lowered her head, clearly not wanting to be brought into the argument. It is true, my lady. His Grace did say I was to continue Princess Arya's training if I had the time. Don't you try that with me, young lady. Your brother told me of this deal he made with you. He did not give you permission to shirk your responsibilities. Talisa is holding court right now and you should be there. Why, Talisa is the queen. She doesn't need me for that. Your good sister is 4 months pregnant. Soon she will be bedridden and you will have to hold court in her place. Until then you should learn from her example. But it's boring. Everyone just complains. Arya whined. That's part of ruling. Now I will not ask again. If you want to touch another sword this month you will get yourself cleaned. Arya marched off to the castle in a huff and Shireen followed right behind. Bathing had taken longer than she had hoped. All the old servants had been missing since the sack. Now mostly guards inhabited Winterfell. The Unsullied had been kind enough to bring up hot water for her even though she had not asked them. Rob had told her before they went their separate ways that the Unsullied were warriors and not servants, but Blue Beetle had been quite adamant that the princess was taken care of. She had dressed and began walking down to the Great Hall. "You are not going to court dressed like that," Caitlin yelled. "Why?" Rob said, "I only had to wear dresses during weddings." Arya complained. "I don't care what your brother said. King or not, no daughter of mine will attend court like that." So Arya was forced to change into a dress before she attended court. She entered the Great Hall of Winterfell and took a seat to the right of Talisa. Maester Rodri sat on the other side of Talisa to advise her on all matters, and Arya's mother sat to the right of Arya. "Lord Umber along with your brother has completely destroyed the last of the Ironborn across the Stony Shore." "That is most welcome news, Master Leopold," Talisa replied. "While the defeat of the Ironborn is great news, it has led to some problems. Nearly a dozen villages were burned down, leaving hundreds of villages homeless. And many more villages along the Stony Shore no longer will be safe there even after the Ironborn were taken care of. Nearly 1,000 small folk have been searching for shelter. Lady Dustin has already turned them away. I have taken an additional 100 peasants into Torrens Square, yet most still seek a place to stay. I thank you for telling me this. This war has been hard on the people of the North. The Crown will not shirk its responsibility to its people. Send all that you cannot handle to Winterfell. We will find a place for them in Wintertown. Your Grace, I don't know if we have sufficient stores to handle that many people," the Maester said to the Queen. "Winter is nearly upon us and we need to be cautious. You speak wisely, but we will not leave the small folk out in the cold. Master Leopold, if you would send us half your stores to help us feed the small folk." Master Leopold began to open his mouth in protest but was cut off. "Of course you would be compensated for your sacrifice. Because of how close it is to winter, I will offer you twice the normal value. I know Torrens Square lies next to a river. If you do not have sufficient ships to import food, I will write to my brother. He will give you charge of a ship or two if needed to purchase additional supplies." Arya could have sworn that Master Leopold was nearly drooling at the mention of twice the normal value. "I would be most honored to help the Crown," he replied. "You have the Crown's thanks. Now if there is nothing further." "There was one other thing," he interrupted. "Yes?" Talisa asked without showing the slightest amount of annoyance. "Since an heir has yet to be chosen for Hornwood, I was hoping to put forth a claim for my son Brandon. His mother was Lord Hornwood's sister. As I have come to understand from the previous Maester's notes, it was Prince Bran's wish to have Lord Hornwood's bastard legitimized." Maester Rodri replied. Arya noticed a deep scowl from both her mother and Master Leopold. "Your Grace, I would remind you that King Rob has already announced his intention to legitimize his bastard brother. If he legitimizes Ley and Snow Lords might begin to worry that he has a habit of legitimizing bastards." Arya was about to yell at the man, but she felt Talisa's hand on her leg. "I hear your concern, Master Leopold. I apologize, but I'm new to the North and have yet to learn of every lord. It seems there are 2 others that have put forward claims to Hornwood. I fear you will have to wait for my husband to make a ruling on this matter. However, I promise he will be told of your claim, and because of the great service you have offered the Crown, it will be my advice to His Grace that he accept your son's claim." Master Leopold bowed deeply. "Your Grace is most kind, and I have thought on it and realize it would be wrong of me to take advantage of your generous offer. Since you seek the food to support the small folk, I would be fine in accepting the normal price." Talisa gave the man a warm smile. "His Grace will not forget your aid to the Crown." And with that Talisa ended court. "I don't like what he said about bastards. It's not his place to question who Rob legitimizes," Arya said once the great hall was empty of all but herself, her mother, the Queen, and Maester Rodri. "Regardless of whether it's his place, he has a point. Lords and ladies will not be happy if they feel Rob has a habit of legitimizing bastards. Jon's legitimization is the only one that truly matters." Maester Rodri said to Arya. "Even at a fair price, I worry about the cost of buying so much food. Even though we no longer send taxes to King's Landing, the coffers have not filled as fast as will be needed to buy food for the entire winter as His Grace wishes." Maester Rodri said gravely. "I was told Rob took a large sum of coin from the attack on Duskendale." Talisa replied. I believe Rob took that with him to White Harbor. Caitlin said. Lord Marndale is trying to mint new coins for his grace. It may take some time to get that coin returned. The Maester added. My father brought a large assortment of wedding gifts from the Volantis nobles. Silks, Mirish lace, gold and silver plate, some very fine jewelry. We'll take what we need from that and offer it to him. Talisa replied. As you say, your grace. You have been a great help to me, Maester Rodri. I fear I will not know what to do when you return to Castle Sawin. Your grace, you honor me, but I fear you do not give yourself enough credit. You have taken to ruling quite well in such a short time. I'm sure you will get on fine with Lady Caitlin to advise you. Do you think it was wise to offer him double? Had he not been so shamed by your praise of him, he might have taken advantage of your generous offer. Caitlin asked. Wise? No needed. Yes, my lady. My father won over most of the lords who fought in the Battle of the Three Hills, but for the rest they have little love for me. Rob's popularity has not transferred to me. I hope to make friends anywhere I can. Her Grace is right. It would be good to gain as much support as possible before we announce His Grace's decision to let the wildlings settle the new gift. Once we do that, even His Grace's spotless battle record will not keep the lords from voicing complaints. I do not understand what was going through Rob's head. He knows letting them pass the wall would anger his bannermen. I do not see what could be gained from letting them settle the gift. Caitlin said. Maybe he wants them to join his army. Arya interjected. If that's his plan, it's a risky one. The Maester added. He smashed their entire host, 100,000 strong if the reports can be believed, with less than 1,500 mounted men. Whatever he gains in fighting strength could well be lost in the Lord's support. We need to focus on keeping the lords closest to the new gift happy. Karstark is lost to us, but Umbers and Glovers may still be placated. I cannot speak for House Glover, but I trust Lord Umber to stand by Rob. The man has not once complained to Rob while I have been queen. Even gave me a warm smile and a bow the day after our wedding. Talisa added. Well, if Lord Umber gives his support to His Grace, the other lords may fall in line. Maester Rodri said optimistically. Oh, I have news from Theon Greyjoy. He didn't happen to say anything about bringing back all that gold Rob gave, did he? Talisa just trying to lift the dour mood of the meeting. No, but he did say he was able to gain some more support amongst the lords unhappy with Euron Greyjoy's ascension to the Seastone chair. He says House Harlaw, Black Tide, and Botley have joined him. Well, I suppose it wasn't a complete loss then. Talisa conceded. He should be here in time for the anniversary feast. It seems wrong to be having a feast so close to winter. Should we not be storing all the food we can? And what of the Riverland lords? How will they take it that we are having feasts at a time like this? Talisa asked her good mother. Do not fret. This feast will be the last until summer returns. These events are needed to save face. We must show that order has been restored to the north. Much business will be discussed when the lords come to celebrate. Caitlin said in a reassuring voice. Do you think Rob will make it here at time? Arya asked. No, I fear His Grace is occupied with rallying the mountain clans to his cause. The Maester answered. Have we received any word from Lady Dustin? Roderick told me she did not come for the harvest festival. I will not have her miss this one. Caitlin said with a hint of anger. We have not received word back from her. Rodri said. If she does not attend, we may have need to summon her to Winterfell. Rob told me she sent just under 400 foot and 50 horse to join him when he called the banners. Maester Rodri tells me she should have sent at least 4 times that number. Talisa said, turning to the Maester to support the claim. It is true. Many believe she held back the majority of her strength. We all know she had little trouble driving the Ironborn from her lands. The Maester replied. I'm told Lady Dustin holds a grudge against my late husband. He was supposed to marry her and had to marry me after Brandon was murdered. She later married William Dustin, who died during Robert's rebellion. She held Ned responsible for his death, I believe. Caitlin said sadly. I suppose we should wait until after the feast to worry about it though. Talisa said. When Arya went to bed that night, she was under the impression that the next day she would be able to return to her training. Her mother had quickly destroyed that notion when she awoke the next morning. But court isn't until noon. Why can't I practice with Shireen? Arya cried. Because there are things that you need to be informed of before court is held. Caitlin replied coldly. So Arya was forced again to dress in her most uncomfortable formal wear and met Talisa in the great hall for breakfast. Her good sister greeted her warmly. Good morning. Arya didn't feel the morning was very good at all, but saw no reason to spurn her good sister's kindness. Good morning, she replied bluntly. They received an outrider informing us that the wilderling hostages Rob sent on ahead will be here on the morrow. Arya could not think of anything to say in response, so only gave a subtle nod in understanding. I fear that the number of hostages we are to take in may be too large to keep our eyes on. I was planning on sending half of them to White Harbor. Do you think that a wise decision? Talisa asked. Arya wasn't sure why her good sister felt the need to ask her this kind of stuff. She was the queen, and if she needed advice on ruling, her mother or the maester would be better suited. However, while she thought on it, an answer did come to Arya. The Mandaealis are among our most loyal bannermen. 1,000 years ago the king of the Reach drove the Mandaealis out. My ancestors sheltered them, and from that day they promised to be our men. Talisa smiled at the answer. That is very good to know. It seems the Stark name inspires loyalty in more than just northerners. Your Grace, we received a small group of men who wished to speak to you. The maester said as he walked into the hall. I will be holding court in a few hours. Tell them I will be most happy to listen to their concerns then. Talisa replied. Yes, I told them just that, but the men seemed very adamant about speaking directly to the king. They claim to have traveled all the way from Essos. Did you inform them that the king is at the wall? I did, Your Grace. They still wish to speak to a Stark all the same. Fine. Give me 5 minutes to finish breakfast with Princess Arya. Talisa replied, mildly annoyed. What would people from Essos want with Rob? Arya asked. If I had to guess, I would assume they are leaders of a sellsword company. Talisa replied dryly. Isn't that good? We could hire them to fight with Rob. Arya asked, confused. Gold is scarce, and from what my father has told me, he has a rather hard time in keeping the sellswords he did purchase under control. They have a bad habit of plundering wherever they are fighting. I know Rob would not be happy to have them unleashed in the Riverlands. As Talisa and Arya finished their meal, Maester Rodri entered the great hall with 10 Unsullied behind him. In his hands he held a platter of bread and salt. The men should be here any moment, he said. Talisa turned to her good sister and spoke quietly in her ear. Why do we give guests bread and salt? Arya gave her good sister a look of disbelief. How did Rob not explain that? You're the Queen of the North. Anyone who is given bread and salt under a lord's roof is guaranteed protection. It is forbidden for the host to harm him or the guest to harm the host. She replied quietly. As soon as Arya was finished explaining guest right to her good sister, 4 men and 2 women entered the great hall. Arya found their dress rather inappropriate for the harsh climate of the north. They all wore leather clothing, but none had any furs to speak of. Beside the lack of appropriate clothing, most of their appearances had little in common. The largest man, who was nearly as tall as Hodder, had chains wrapped across his chest forming an X over a white rose that was sewn on his shirt. Another man had a red cape and wore metal gauntlets on his hands but had no other armor. Arya found that rather odd. Why have gauntlets if you're not going to have a full set of armor? Another one of the men wore a helm with a huge feather on top that made him look ridiculous. The 2 women were almost complete opposites. As if night and day. One woman wore bright colors of both yellow and blue over her leather armor. A heavy red cape trailed along her back. Her hair was tied into multiple braids, each dyed in a different color. The other woman wore only plain leather. The strange swords that looked like hooks that she carried on each of her hips and a blue rose sewn on her chest were the only thing that distinguished her from the most common of foot soldiers. The man that stood behind her dressed equally as plainly. The maester presented them with the bread and salt and they all took a bite from it. The maester tells me you have all traveled from Essos to speak to the king. While I regret to inform you that he is currently attending to other matters further north, I Talisa Stark, Queen in the North and of the Trident, Lady of Winterfell, welcome you all. Arya had to admit her good sister did sound quite queenly as she spoke from Winterfell's throne. The men and women seemed to talk amongst themselves as soon as Talisa had finished her introduction. Finally, they broke. The tallest among them stepped forward to speak. My name is Cregan Umber. I am the captain of the Company of the White Rose. My lieutenant here is Brandon Moss, he said in a booming voice before stepping back. The man wearing the metal gauntlets stepped forward. My name is Arthur Glover, captain of the Company of the Red Rose. My lieutenant Jocelyn Flint, he said before stepping back. Finally, the plain-looking women stepped forward. My name is Alysanne Frost, captain of the Company of the Rose. My lieutenant Burns Sawin. You must forgive me, but I'm quite new to the North. You all seem to be born of noble houses of the North. Talisa asked. We are, Your Grace. Arthur Glover said. We are the descendants of those who refused to accept Torrhen Stark's surrender to Aegon Targaryen. And while the company they formed has broken into different factions, all of us have agreed to support the king of our ancestors. Alysanne Frost said. You have my thanks for coming to support my husband, but you must know that with winter upon us we do not have the gold to pay for 3 sellsword companies. Talisa replied. You misunderstand our intentions, Your Grace. It was out of loyalty that our ancestors left the North. They refused to accept any other king but the king in the North. Now that your husband has broken away from the Iron Throne, we have come to support his claim. We require no gold nor lands, only to be allowed to return to the homeland of our forefathers. Cregan Umber said in his commanding voice. Both Talisa and Arya were taken by surprise by the man's statement. Talisa recovered as best she could. You honor me and my husband beyond words. Of course you are welcome back into the king's service. Bend the knee and swear your allegiance and be welcomed back into the king's service. We cannot do that, Alysanne Frost said. Talisa's bright smile began to fade as confusion overcame her. You are the king's wife and have our respect, but you are of Volantis by birth. Jocelyn explained. We will only say our vows before a Stark of Winterfell. Brandon Moss added. Her Grace has the king's confidence. Maester Rodri said coldly. Fear not, Maester Rodri. Talisa said in a calm manner. I understand your desire to bend the knee to a true Stark. Beside me is the king's sister, Arya Stark, the Princess of Winterfell. Will you give her your vow? The 3 sellsword captains spoke among themselves. Finally, they came to a conclusion. We will, they said in unison. Arya looked at her good sister nervously. In return she gave her a warm smile. They wished to give their fealty to a true Stark. Accept their vows proudly, she whispered. So Arya stood up. I, Arthur Glover, captain of the Red Rose, pledge 700 swords to the king in the North, he said, taking out his sword and kneeling. I, Cregan Umber, captain of the White Rose, pledge 700 swords to the king in the North, he said, taking out his sword and kneeling. I, Alysanne Frost, captain of the True Company of the Rose, pledge 1,200 swords to the king in the North, she said, taking out her sword and kneeling. Rise. I, Arya Stark, Princess of Winterfell, welcome you back to the homeland of your ancestors, Arya said in the most formal voice she had ever used. Talisa gave her good sister a smile in congratulations. Your officers are welcome to stay in Winterfell until the king's return. There is more than enough room in Wintertown for the men of your companies. I invite you all to attend the anniversary feast that is to be held at the end of the week. All of the captains and lieutenant thanked Talisa and Arya for their hospitality. Please sit with us, Talisa asked the captains. Please have some wine and refreshments brought out for our guests, Talisa said to the maester. Soon servants brought wine and fruit for the 3 captains of the companies. The captains drank heavily from the wine they had been given and began speaking of their adventures within the 3 cities. Arya realized she would have cursed herself had she missed the opportunity to meet the 3 captains. Each one spoke of multiple adventures and dozens of battles that they had been part of while in Essos. And as we tried to retreat, we became encircled by Dothraki. We made what we thought at the time to be our last stand. From every direction they charged. They came in small groups of no more than 50 at first, each of them trying to gain glory for themselves. They fought bravely, and died foolishly. We showered each group with dozens of arrows before they made it anywhere near us. Piles of dead surrounded our position. At last we ran out of arrows while the Dothraki horde came at us like a wave. Kullosa and his 10,000 screamers charged the hill from all sides. Though we were only 1,200 strong, we descended the hill knowing full well we would die. Rather than give up, we hoped to take as many of them with us as possible. As we rode down the hill, the gods came to our aid. Lightning came from the sky and struck the ground. There had not been rain in months, and the grass ignited like wildfire. Flames engulfed the circling army. The Dothraki horses went crazy as they tried to survive. Thousands in the back of the army scattered as the wall of fire spread. 100 were caught in the flames, and those in front of them were stuck between us and a fiery death. We threw what remained of Kullosa's Khalasar back into the flames and watched as they burned. And as quickly as the flames had ignited, they burned out. Though we gained many prizes from our fallen enemy, the greatest prize was this. Alysanne Frost said before putting her sword on the table. I pulled this Valyrian steel arrow from Kullosa's burned body. His hands came off of his body as I pulled it off of him. Arya looked at the blade with intense fascination. She loved her needle deeply, not only because it was a weapon that complemented her style, but because it had been a gift from her brother. This, however, was on a completely different level. Only heads of great houses had Valyrian steel swords. For some sellsword captain to have one was nothing short of amazing. She wanted to hold the blade in her hand and swing it a few times, but knew it was not an appropriate time to ask for something like that. And if her mother heard about her playing with a sword while she was supposed to be hosting guests, she would never hear the end of it. So Arya carried on silently, listening in on numerous adventures that much later in her life she would look back on and realize how incredibly embellished they must have been. Hosting the return of the 3 companies of the Rose had brought so much joy to Arya that she hardly complained that she was only able to practice swords twice in the coming week. She had helped Talisa hold court that entire week. While she had mostly just listened in, Talisa had surprisingly deferred to her on several matters. She had given the best advice she could, but that moment she had just realized how difficult the job must have been for Talisa. She had only spent a month in the north, and dozens of small folk and nobles alike were coming to her to solve their problems. And even Arya knew that many of the things the people wished for her to fix were beyond her power. She could do nothing about crops coming up short or autumn snows slowing down trade. They didn't have any masons to help petty lords repair their holdfasts, and even if they did, there was much that needed to be fixed around Winterfell. Why would anybody want to be a queen? You just listen to people complain to you and blame you for stuff that isn't your fault. And then you have to give them kind words in return. Arya thought. Finally, the anniversary feast had arrived. She knew her mother was going to make her wear a dress, and she had just counted herself lucky it was not too itchy. She had envied Shireen's during the feast. She sat at a separate table with Lady Seaworth and Devan, while Arya had to greet guests with her mother and Talisa. She had been glad when they had finally been allowed to sit down. The great hall had been filled with most of the nobility of the north and even a few Riverlands nobles. Lord Mallister showed up himself. Several Freys came, to everyone's annoyance. Both Vances sent a representative. Lord Motton sent his daughter, for safety most likely, considering Maidenpool was one of the closest territories to King's Landing. Lord Blackwood sent his daughter to serve as a handmaiden for Talisa, and Lord Bracken, not wanting to be outdone, sent his eldest daughter as well. Talisa thanked all the guests for gracing her with their presences and then ordered for the dishes to be served. It had been quite a lavish feast by northern standards. Lord Marndale had brought in large amounts of meats and fruits and even imported some delicacies from Volantis in honor of the Queen. About an hour into the feast, laughter and drunken singing had taken over the great hall. The sellsword captains and sergeants were by far the loudest in the hall. Arya seemed to enjoy the noise far more than her mother, who appeared to be getting a headache. Arya very distinctly remembered the eerie silence that overcame the guests during the middle of the meal. She looked on, just like every other person, as Theon Greyjoy walked into the great hall dressed in all the finery of a southern lord. Walking with him were 3 men, all in much plainer clothing. Arya noticed that he didn't have the same cocky smile that he so often wore back before the war began. He wore a mask of indifference as he approached the high table. "Your Grace, you look even more beautiful than when I last laid eyes on you," he said as he took a knee. "You are too kind, Prince Theon." Talisa struggled to stand up to greet her guest. "Please rise," she said as she extended her hand out. Theon took it and kissed it chastely. "Where is our king? I rode through the night so that I could attend his party. Unfortunately, his grace took a detour and marched to Last Hearth. I'm sure he will be pleased that you have returned. To leave someone as beautiful as yourself all alone. Surely his grace does not deserve you," Theon replied. Talisa gave a polite chuckle at his flirting and then asked him to enjoy the feast. Arya found Theon's actions rather odd. While it was no surprise to see Theon flirting, she couldn't help but feel he was forcing it. She no longer saw the hunger in his eyes that was so common when he used to talk to the serving girls. No, it seemed as if he was going through the motions. As soon as Theon turned to find a chair, he was met by a harsh slap in the face. Lady Glover began thrashing at him wildly. "Where are my children, Greyjoy?" she screamed. Theon finally managed to grab both of Lady Glover's hands and stop her from attacking him. "Lady Glover, your children will be here in a day or two." "What?" "I brought them back with me when I returned north. Me and my men rode on ahead so that I could enjoy the feast." "You just left them behind," Lady Glover said, returning into a rage. "I assure you they are well guarded. My mother is with them and her safety is of the utmost importance to me." This seemed to finally calm Lady Glover down as she returned to her seat. The awkward silence continued for a few seconds until the Queen asked the singer that Lord Marndale had brought with him, to sing The Wolf in the West, a song that had come about during Robb's Westerland campaign. Soon joy returned to the feast and dancing resumed. The party would go on long into the night. The guests in attendance were in no quick hurry to return to their holdfasts, to both the Queen and the Queen Mother's annoyance. Many said that it was the snowstorm that prevented them from leaving, but Arya knew that to be a lie. They all wanted to stay so that they could greet the king when he arrived. They had all hoped he would arrive at the end of the week, but they would again be disappointed. However, to Arya and Shireen what arrived was far more interesting. Talisa, Arya, her mother, Princess Shireen, Theon, Roderick Castle, and a dozen guards waited at the castle gate to greet the coming visitors. "Why do we need be here? Didn't the outrider say that we're just bringing wilderling hostages?" Arya complained. She had already begun thinking of winning her sparring match against Devan. "I'm sure they'll prefer the term guests when they arrive," Theon replied. Arya looked at Theon and could tell he was making fun of her but did not understand how. Finally, after a few seconds, she understood his implication. She was grateful that he seemed to let it end there, and both of them returned to facing the open gate. "I see them!" Shireen yelled. Everyone struggled to see some of the party coming in from the distance. "Wow, some of them are really tall," Arya said. "Why are they coming in so slow?" Theon added. "It's like they're walking here," Theon said in shock. It was at that point that everyone realized not all the party was comprised of humans. Escorted by a dozen men were 3 giants and a red-headed wilderling woman. The mountain had been the tallest person Arya had ever come into contact with, and all 3 of the giants she saw that day were nearly a foot taller than him. All the guards and Theon raised their weapons in caution as they approached. "Stand your weapons down," Horlis Mollin said from on top his horse. "His Grace said they are to be treated as honored guests." All the guards reluctantly lowered their weapons. Talisa was the first person to remember his duties. "My apologies. I welcome you to Winterfell. I'm Talisa of House Stark, Queen of the North and Trident, Lady of Winterfell. I'm honored to have you here." The group waited for a response. "They don't speak the common tongue. I was sent here to speak for them," the red-headed woman said. She then turned and began speaking to the giants in their own tongue. All 3 of the giants went to a knee, but the wilderling woman remained standing. Talisa ignored the insult and asked them to stand. She then signaled to the servants to bring out the bread and salt. They were all very reluctant to approach the giants, but they eventually did their duty. The woman took a normal-sized bite while the first giant ate the rest of the bread on the plate. Lucky the servants had brought enough for a larger party and split the next piece in two, giving one to each of the other giants. Well, I'll have the servants prepare rooms for you. We may have some trouble finding rooms that are a proper fit, she said in the politest way she could think of. You can't possibly think of putting them in the castle, Caitlin said to Talisa in a louder voice than should have been used. I trust that Rob knew what he was doing when he sent them here. Guest means guest. It only seems appropriate that we find rooms for them inside Winterfell, she replied to her good mother. It seemed that the entire castle with the exception of Shireen and Arya were completely horrified by the giants. Arya didn't seem to understand that at all. Sure, they were big, but they had only ever been kind the whole time they were here. They kneeled to Talisa when they arrived and even laughed when Shireen's fool juggled for them. Arya and Shireen had spent a full day playing with them and nothing bad had come of it. That was until her mother realized where they were and had nearly had the guards kill the giants. Her mother and Lady Seaworth had been so frightened by the ordeal that they had threatened to never allow them to leave the castle if they went anywhere near them again. Arya had not been willing to see if her mother was bluffing and had stayed far away from then on. Finally, after another week, they had received word that Rob was set to arrive. Once again they formed up at the gate, this time with all the nobles that had stayed from the party, and waited to greet their king. Arya had to say her brother's homecoming was all that could be hoped for and more. His army arrived at the gates atop their horses looking like warriors from a song. Each man held his head high as nobles and small folk cheered alike. They poured into the castle and until there was almost no room left. A path opened from the center of the army and Rob trotted through it. Flanked by a dozen nobles of his personal guard at his back and with Grey Wind at the front of the pack, he entered into the center of the yard and was welcomed with thunderous applause. All but the royal family went to a knee. He had decided to wear his iron and bronze crown, that he himself had admitted was incredibly uncomfortable, and it looked as if it was destined to be part of him. Arya noted that he wore a different expression than she had expected. After finally returning to his home after 2 years of warring, he appeared as if he didn't even notice. He seemed not only tired but angry, at what she knew not. From all Talisa had told her, things had gone on great. They smashed the Wilderling army at the wall. He had repelled the last of the Ironborn from the north, and had rallied the mountain clans to his side. As the group stopped, Grey Wind continued on ahead to the Queen and began licking her hand. It would seem he missed me, Talisa said with smile. As did I, Rob replied, and his face began to show signs of relief. Out of the pack of nobles a second direwolf pushed its way through and came up to Talisa. Shagidog! Arya yelled out in shock. It had never occurred to her that her brother's direwolves could still be alive. Shagidog was a little smaller than Grey Wind, but he was far more wild. Instead of gently licking Talisa's hand, he began to show his teeth and growl at her. Both Theon and Sir Roderick stepped between the Queen and Shagidog. Shaggy! A young voice cried out from among the nobles. It took a few seconds, but eventually the mighty direwolf relented and returned to the nobles. Arya looked up and could not believe what she was seeing. Atop a horse was her baby brother. His hair had grown out and he was a few years older than she remembered, but it was him. Arya tried to process what was going on, while her mother broke through the men standing in front of her and ran past Shagidog to embrace her youngest child. The youngest Stark child dismounted his horse and was nearly tackled by his mother. Cries of joy began to fill the courtyard. Rob dismounted from his horse and tried to handle the awkward situation that had come from the reunion. He commanded everyone to rise. You all have honored me with your welcome. I thank you all for greeting me. I bring joyous news. My brother, Rickon Stark, has been found. I thank the gods for bringing him back to my family. Though we have finally expelled the Ironborn from our homes, this war is not over. We will march back south and finish off the Lannisters. This war will not be over until all of my subjects are free from the yoke of the Iron Throne. And with that short speech he began walking into the castle. All of Rob's family was quite surprised he gave such a short speech considering what they had all just learned, but followed him into the castle all the same. Arya and her mother walked on both sides of Rickon as they followed Talisa and Rob into his council chambers. Both Arya and her mother tried to get Rickon to say something to them, but he refused to speak. I don't understand. I thought you told me they found Bran and Rackon's bodies. Talisa asked. They found bodies that seemed to be theirs, completely burned. It would seem they wanted everyone to think them dead. I'll explain in a moment. The entire Stark family and Sir Roderick entered the council chamber. As soon as the door was closed, Robb was bombarded with questions. Where did you find him? Why didn't you tell me you found him? Is Bran alive too? Why can't he talk? Everyone asked Robb. Enough. One question at a time. Robb said in an annoyed tone. Is Bran alive as well? Do you know where he is? Caitlin asked. Robb ignored the fact that that was two questions and decided to answer. Jon informed me that one of his brothers saw Bran heading north of the wall. I've sent out hundreds of wildlings to find him and bring him south. You sent wildlings to find your brother? She asked incredulously. You should have sent your own men to find him. It's their land. They'll have a better chance of tracking him than any man from the North would. Robb defended. Why did this man from the Night's Watch let him cross the wall? He's a cripple. It seems Lord Reed's children convinced Bran that he was supposed to meet someone they called the Three-Eyed Raven. It matters not. Robb dismissed. We'll find him eventually. Arya could tell her mother wanted to demand that Robb do more, but she could tell that he was in no mood to explain a decision he had already made. Plus, she quickly turned her attention to Rickon. Though I'm glad you found reinforcements, I worry about feeding so many new mouths. We've planned for a feast for your arrival, but after that I think we need to start heavy rationing. I've already offered to take in refugees from the Stony Shore. It didn't seem right to let them down out in the cold, but with the army, the refugees, I worry that the food won't last. And it's fine. Robb interrupted. You upheld the Crown's duty. I'm glad you were here to make the decision. Robb finished trying to calm his wife. So who was it that burned those bodies? Theon asked, reminding everyone of what they truly wanted to know from Robb. The mere question seemed to anger Robb. His fists clenched tightly on the table as he spoke. It was the Boltons. Chapter 19, Truth. In the name of the Maiden, I charge you to protect all women. Robb moved Lightbringer off of Gendry's shoulder. Now rise, Sir Gendry of the Wall. Gendry rose and took a place next to Sir Patrek and Seleucus. All the men of the Night's Watch and the Northern Army cheered. Robb's army was making the preparation to leave while Robb spoke to his brother in the King's Tower. Sir Davos and Jon's steward accompanied them. I'm leaving you 100 men under the command of Sir Richard Horpe. Davos tells me they believe the enemy of their Red God is on the other side of the wall. They seem most devoted to defending it. They would be helpful to you should the White Walkers come. I will put them to good use. Will you be marching straight to Winterfell? Jon asked his brother. No, I plan on heading to the mountains. Most of the mountain clans didn't join me when I marched south the first time. Robb said with a noticeable amount of malice. They should have plenty of fresh levies that can be raised. I'm sure you'll eat well while you're there. Jon said, trying to lighten the mood. I'm sure. Robb said with a smile. This might be a long shot, but if you find any dragonglass while in the south, it is greatly needed. Jon said, showing his brother the dragonglass dagger. For what? It can kill the others. You're certain of this? Robb asked while he inspected the dagger. Sam slew one himself with it. Jon said, pointing to his friend. Robb looked at Jon's friend skeptically. Well, if I can find any, I'll send it to you. Dragonstone is filled with the stuff. Unfortunately, Lord Florent has most likely given the island back to the Lannisters. Davos replied. However, if it is that valuable, I might be able to smuggle some out of the island. Any that you can might change the tide of the war to come. Jon said gravely. It will be done, my lord, Davos replied. As far as Mance's demands, I've ordered Wendell Mandaily to prepare the ships. Mance will travel to Eastwatch and lead the fleet to Hardham to retrieve the remaining wildlings. Send the hostages down to Winterfell. Understood. There was a favor I wanted to ask of you. What kind of favor? My friend Gilly. I was hoping you could take her and her baby to Winterfell. Sam interjected. Fine. There's also a boy. Ollie. His village was attacked by the wildling party that you saved us from. I think it would be best if he was kept away from the wildlings. John added. Fine, Rob replied in a dismissive tone. He then became reluctant to say what came next. I will also be taking Ygritte to Winterfell with me. For what reason? John asked in a harsher tone than should have been used. Do I really need to tell you? I respect the choice to have made to honor your vows, but you must know that choice comes with consequences. I married a highborn girl from another land and it nearly tore my kingdom in two. The Night's Watch has been at war with the wildlings for thousands of years. It would not do well to have the Lord Commander bedding a wilderling. I'll send her with the other wildlings to man the abandoned castles. John replied. And how long to until you convince yourself of some reason she should be at Castle Black? John, you love her. I understand that, but you cannot be trusted to look at this rationally. Winterfell will be the best place for her. John resigned himself to his brother's decision. She'll be treated well. Of course. Rob replied. Rob and John stood on the battlements of Castle Black as 400 children walked through the gate. They were escorted into the army to march south. Then thousands of women and children came in. Rob noticed that they came in with all that they owned. Hundreds of goats, cows, and chickens followed them into Castle Black. At least they are bringing some supplies with them. Finally, the warriors entered. They carried wooden clubs, spears, stone weapons, and swords scavenged from fallen brothers of the Night's Watch. Rob spoke to Mance for several minutes before he was sent to Eastwatch to retrieve the other wildlings. John had gathered most of the warriors and separated them into groups to man the other castles along the wall. Rob mounted his horse once most of the wildlings and the army had left the castle. Rob could tell that many of the men in the Night's Watch looked to be glad at his departure. Oh, I almost forgot. He pulled out a scroll from his saddle and handed it to John. This may not serve a purpose anymore, but a royal decree is a royal decree. And with that he rode off to meet his army. John stared at the scroll. He saw the grey wax of House Stark on it. He broke the seal and opened it and read. By order of Robb Stark, first of his name, King in the North and of the Trident, Lord of Winterfell, legitimizes Jon Snow, bastard son of Eddard Stark. From this day till the end of time he is to be regarded as Jon Stark. He is hereby placed in the line of succession equal to that of a true-born Stark. Should his grace die without issue, Jon Stark will assume lordship of Winterfell and the crown of the North and Trident. Robb Stark, King in the North and of the Trident. Jon smiled. All my life this has been the only thing I ever wanted, and now because of my vows I cannot truly enjoy it. If I accept this decree, am I not acknowledging Robb's crown? The Night's Watch takes no sides. Good luck, Your Grace, he said, even though he knew his brother was far too distant to hear him. He turned and walked through the courtyard. As he approached a fire he threw the parchment in it. It had taken twice as long for the army to reach the new gift as it would have if they traveled alone. Unfortunately, the wildlings slowed down the army drastically. After 5 days, they reached Queenscrown. Robb had given the wildlings free range over the new gift but had left 25 men at Queenscrown under the command of Owen. He knew a single score men could do little against 15,000 wildlings, but Robb had told all the clan chiefs that Owen had authority to speak on his behalf, and hopefully Owen would be able to mediate any dispute among the wildlings. Robb had sent his men in small parties across the new gift to any villages that still inhabited it. He had offered every family a dragon if they would leave their village. Most did not have enough to their name to turn down a dragon and agreed without much of an argument. Best not to have any villages for the wildlings to come in contact with if it can be avoided. Robb had sent them and the wilderling hostages with half of his army up ahead to Winterfell. He and the other half of his army then marched on into the mountains. The Norys were the first clan to greet Robb. As he and Jon had guessed, they threw a feast in celebration for his visit. It almost felt wrong to be having a feast in the middle of a war, but he knew that refusing the Norys' hospitality would not go over well. If he wanted to get their support, he would eat all he could, drink as much as possible, and dance with every daughter that asked. They went from House Norry to House Flint, then to the Liddles, and after that the Vulls. The leader of the Vull clan, Hugo Vull, or as everyone called him, Big Bucket Vull, had been the most enthusiastic to greet Robb. He threw a feast twice as large as any other clan and spoke at length of his eagerness to fight for Robb. Robb had restrained himself from asking him why he had not answered Robb's call in the first place if he was so eager to fight for him. From there they visited a dozen other clans and had dozen more feasts. Robb wished he could have just had them all feast him at one place but knew that request would have been seen as an insult. Each day his host grew larger as more men joined his cause. As he arrived at the holdfast of the knots he was surprised to meet Galbert Glover and a woman who wore the shield of House Mormont. "Welcome, your grace," Galbert Glover told his king as he took a knee. "Rise," Robb commanded. "I take it you were successful in liberating Deepwood Motte." "We were, your grace. Was actually much easier than we thought it would be thanks to Lady Alysain," he said holding his hand out to bring attention to Alysain Mormont. "You have my thanks, my lady," Robb replied. "Any chance to crush some squids?" "Was rather disappointing though if I'm being honest. Was not even 200 among them when we attacked. Most drowned trying to get back to the boats." "That is welcome news. If Lord Umber was as successful as you were, the North should finally be free of Ironborn." "Well, not completely free, your grace," Alysain said with a smile. She signaled to her men and a woman was brought out in chains. "Killed 3 of my men before we finally took her down. And she took my niece and nephew to the fucking Iron Islands," Galbert Glover added. "I already told you. My brother took your niece and nephew to Winterfell," the woman argued as she was forced to kneel in front of the king. "And who are you?" Robb asked. "Asha Greyjoy, daughter of Balon Greyjoy and the rightful heir to the Seastone chair," she replied proudly. "As I was told, your uncle now holds that position." "My uncle?" Asha spat. "My uncle arrived on the Iron Islands the day after my father died." "That seems suspicious to you." "You will refer to him as your grace," Alysain said before hitting Asha in the back of the head. "That seems suspicious to you, your grace," she mocked. "Then what of your brother? Is he not the true heir to your father?" "What Theon? Your lapdog? He's no true Ironborn. But he is your father's only surviving son." "My father never thought so. As far as he was concerned, all his sons died in the first rebellion." "Well, I can't say I'm happy with Theon losing the King's Moot, but as I'm told your new king has set his eyes on richer lands. Don't know what he hopes to accomplish other than angering the Tyrells, but I will not complain. I could have assisted your father in breaking free from the Iron Throne, yet he chose to throw my offer in my face. The only other kingdom seeking independence, and he made an enemy of me. Your father truly was a fool. You must know any hope of remaining independent is gone." "Independence? No, Euron wants much more than that. Said he was going to ally with the Dragon Queen and take the Iron Throne. You're elected a madman to the throne. Fools love a fool, I suppose." Robb ordered her taken but remembered a question as soon as they began to remove her. "I recently learned that my brothers still live. Someone passed off burnt bodies as my brothers. I'm curious, what did your father hope to accomplish but my wrath by making me think he had killed my brothers? We never took Winterfell. Don't get me wrong, my father laughed when he heard that Winterfell was sacked and even took credit for it, but our strength comes from the sea. No one was fool enough to leave the coast. We didn't ask questions. We just moved in to take Torrens Square when all your men returned to defend Winterfell. We couldn't imagine our good luck, well, at least until those fucking Volantin came." Robb looked at the woman, trying to tell if she was lying to him. He saw no indication that she was playing him false and could not think of any reason that she would lie about it. Still, he knew he was not that talented at reading people. "Take her away," he said, annoyed. "So, do you believe her, your grace?" Alysain Mormont asked. "I don't know. I couldn't think of a reason for why she would lie. She must know that until we have Galbert's niece and nephew back she is safe, but if she is telling the truth, then that leaves a far more pressing concern." "What's that, your grace?" Galbert asked. "Who sacked Winterfell?" Robb replied cryptically. His first guess would have been the Lannisters, but even if they had been able to smuggle enough men into the north to sack Winterfell, he could think of no reason to let the Greyjoys take credit for it. And that only left fellow Northerners as a possibility. The thought of one of his own bannermen betraying him unnerved him. The Karstarks were the only house he could even conceive of doing such a thing, and their anger towards him had started long after Winterfell was sacked. I supposed we can figure this out after we have regrouped at Winterfell. This is the last feast I must deal with. By the end of this week we should be at Winterfell. We will have fresh levies to destroy the Lannisters. Looking forward to it, Your Grace. Alysanne with a large smile that revealed her crooked teeth. He prowled through the woods looking for something to eat. It had been a partially cold night and it seemed that the men had hunted all the game in the surrounding woods, then finally he found something. A lone stage with a massive pair of antlers. The animal was grazing, unaware of what was about to happen to him. Quietly he moved behind the trees that surrounded it until he was a single bounce away. He cocked his legs and sprung. Right before he could sink his teeth into the creature, a blur of black fur brought it to the ground and he landed into a thick pile of snow.